Should Sekiro have an easy mode?
Let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome to Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. I'm your host, Brett Beck, and alongside me, Mr.
Saul Bridges, bringing you guys episode 105. 106.
Yes.
106.
You know what's funny is you know that little time period we have, like the 8 seconds of the intro playing? I was like, what episode is this?
I actually thought of that too, and I was like, it's episode 105 because we talked about the last episode, how it was exactly 2 years worth of episodes.
But
and I was like, it was the episode before that. I haven't had a chance to go back behind and listen through us again on the newer one, and that's where I typically take a mental note.
Okay, I've got
busy week for me.
Well, if this is your first time joining us, we are Triangle Squared, a PlayStation-based podcast. If you want to watch us in video format, you can do so on YouTube every Monday at 10 a.m. PST and 12 p.m. CST. If you like what we're doing over there, subscribe, hit the bell notification. It'll let you know when these videos go live, like we said, every Monday for these, and then our reader mails every other Friday, as well as some other stuff we have coming up soon. If you like what we're talking about and you want to throw your own 2 cents in or be part of the community's take section that we have started doing on the show, then you can do so by commenting down in the section below. We love hearing your thoughts. You know, we'll either talk with you back there or bring it back up either way in the community's take section. If you want to listen to us in audio format only, you can also do so there. We've got you covered. You can do so on Apple or Android devices, computer, it doesn't matter, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play Music. You can find us pretty much anywhere. If you want to find us on social media, because listening to the audio doesn't give you options to comment, you can let us know your thoughts on these episodes and participate in the community's take on Twitter and Facebook. Twitter at Triangle SQRD is our handle, and the Facebook group is Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. If you ask to be accepted, we will gladly do so. Saul won't be on there, but you'll see me. Saul does not have a Facebook because he's probably a smart person. But, you know, Facebook is
evil,
an odd necessity for this, but it's okay. I mean, I don't really mind having one. I don't focus on it too much, but in terms of my personal one, but we try and do what we can in the other one. If you want to look at our day-to-day, moment-to-moment life, except for this weekend when I was out of town, I was off of Discord completely, but you can join our Discord. It's in the description below. You can find the link to that invite so you can be added in. And if you would like to support the show and anything we do, be it from $1 to help get us covering all the cost of it, be it new technology or covering the hosting costs for the show, or offering up $5 or $7 depending on your region for custom cases and whatnot, and early access to shows, which is also given at the $1 tier, just to keep that in mind, then consider doing so by clicking on the Patreon link we have down below. It's www.patreon.com/Nartech. If that is all, which I think it is, Saul, I think it's time to move into the normal opening of the show. What's been up to? I didn't talk to anybody all weekend besides the people that I was immediately in front of. So what'd you do this weekend? What'd you do gaming-wise throughout the week? What you been playing?
I did, coincidentally, get to play a good chunk of Sekiro. I got to the last boss. I'm currently on it. I haven't really had a lot of time to go back through and attempt, except a couple of times today. But even today, I've been kind of doing stuff around the apartment, kind of spring cleaning of such. So not a whole lot of time today, probably more so tonight. I'll hopefully be beating the game, but other than that, I did get to jump on Thursday night with my good buddy Joseph, and we played some Destiny 2 just to kind of hang out and enjoy some of that and do some of the newer stuff. But that's kind of been it. I did download GTA 5 on PC. Haven't really got to play a lot of it yet. I downloaded it for like the roleplay thing that's being widely streamed by viewers. I mean, by Twitch streamers, and yeah, it seems like a fun time. So I downloaded that last night. I tried to get into it, but the software I was using for my DS4 wouldn't work properly with the mod. So like, I'm gonna go out and buy an Xbox controller today and jump into that. But that's kind of it. What about you?
I did dip back into Sekiro because last time we talked about the key segment that I came into. So I got to, I decided because of the situation at hand, I did technically fight the butterfly, Lady Butterfly, and then she killed me, which is fine. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm gonna go back and do the ogre first because it seems like it's supposed to kind of be the first boss. It's supposed to kind
of. It's up to you really, but like it does encourage you to zip back and forth between areas.
Yeah. Well, because you can pretty easily.
Yeah.
So I did that. I went back and finally found him, did some stuff, and have not been able to beat him. A little bit of the magnetism thing, I definitely see it. And it only seems on the one where he specifically lunges at you.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to be on any of the other ones. And it feels...
Are you using the flame vent?
Yes.
Okay.
And I noticed if you time it just right, you can stop him from even doing that move.
Yeah.
It does take some timing. I've gotten to where I was just shy of it working. Like right when the fire was hitting him, he went ahead and grabbed me.
He's one of the kind you kind of want to be aggressive on.
Yeah, and I realized that because there's been a couple of times. It's one of those weird things where he was throwing me around because, like, he'd get me from one of those lunge grabs and then he'd throw me off the mountain, and that's how I would die every time. And it was starting to really annoy me.
That only happened to me once, actually. Luckily,
it's happened to me every time he's gotten me in that grab.
Lure
he
him
throws
down
me.
the stairs,
That's what I was doing,
and he's still throwing you off
it's
the
because
mountain?
of the direction that he ends up getting
Yeah.
me in. That's it. It's like I end up having to, because when he grabs you, he throws you down and then back. It's almost like I'm going to have to fight him on the side that I could fall off of. That way, when he grabs me, he's going to throw me towards the wall. That way, I won't fall.
Well,
but
a tip for you and anybody else who plays the game who is stuck on that particular mini boss, you can actually stealth kill him and knock off half his health. So clear through the
that's
4
interesting.
enemies,
Yeah,
and let him pop out, do some damage to him, and then if you run away, that it does the same thing that all Souls game has done, where they forget,
and
but
he'll
he's not
reset.
chained up. So then
Yeah.
you can go up behind him where the spear guy is, and then eventually you can just wait for him to kind of walk into your view when you're perched up on the ledge, and then just target him, jump off, and then you can have a death blow.
Yeah.
So it's half health there.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good idea. I may try that. But we'll get into that a little bit later when we go into the main topic. With that said, though, I also played, more Anthem. This kind of happened that way. I'm pretty sure this happened after the thing. I went back and got the Platinum in Far Cry New Dawn. So I finished that up with Josh. Thank you, Josh, for helping me out. And he got it shortly after I got off.
And y'all like it better than 5?
I do personally, yes.
I think he's
and I'm done with it. So if you want to borrow it, there's somebody I can't remember who it was that I said that I would help them if it came to it. But you're also right down the street, so if it comes to it, I can just go grab the game from you. But if there's a time where you have a lull and you want to borrow it, feel more than free to do so. I got it for $20. It seems hardly worth trading in because it's not going to get that much. And it's an all right game. Don't know that I'll play it again.
You got it for $20, didn't you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it seems to even worry about trading in at that point. But I played that. I started Hollow Knight. I decided that was going to be my thing.
There you go.
I started Hollow Knight, got through. I have defeated. Oh Lord! Of course, I'm gonna forget her name because of the weekend I've had, and I just got back in today, so I'm a little hazed because I drove a lot this weekend and drove in today. But the Hornet was that her name?
Yes.
The one that the new game is going to be based on, right? The one who has the needle.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what her name is now. But yeah, you're right. It's something Hornet.
Okay. Anyway, I beat her and trying to figure out where to go next. I've done a couple of things where I've been looking at areas. The game is incredibly fun. I do wish it had slightly more in-depth combat, but I'm hoping that's actually revealed later in the game as I add more mechanics to different things. And is her name just Hornet?
Yeah, it is. Wow. I, for some reason, thought there was another name, like a surname or something.
Anyway, so I'm wondering if the combat's going to get a little more fleshed out. It looks like there's going to be changeable weapons due to the way the game has a weapon slot, but it may just be there. Don't tell me. I'm
not going to say nothing
I'm curious to see.
I'm going to let you experience that.
I played about 9 hours of the game, I'd say. Maybe 8. I don't know. But I've been really enjoying it. It's got great atmosphere, great art style. I love the hand-drawn look. It really reminds me of the time that I had with the game that had the Eldritch edition just come out, Sundered. The game by Lotus, whatever their name is.
Yeah, you made a custom case.
Thunder Lotus, I think.
Sundered.
Yeah, I love that game. Really good. I love that art style. Being able to take that really heavily looking hand-drawn thing and move it and put it into motion. It's one of the biggest pulls for Cuphead for me as well. I think it's beautiful to look at something that just does not look like a game in any way, shape, form, or fashion. And the biggest way to do that is to do something that has that hand-drawn feel to it and doesn't look like it's so drawn. So it's very stylistically pretty. The soundtrack is beautiful. Is gorgeous. I'm really curious. I wish I would have gotten around to playing this last year because I think it actually would have contended with Dead Cells and and Death's Gambit. Yeah.
See, now you can see how when me and Corey were telling you how long the game actually is, you can kind of see what we mean by that.
Well, because it's a game that's kind of like what I had with Sundered. Like when I went into it, it's a game that the amount of time it takes you to just figure things out and explore as much as you want is the amount of time it's going to take.
Yeah.
And it is really interesting.
And navigating those Metroidvanias like that can be kind of difficult too, because
Yeah.
it's almost, not to say it in a negative way, but the repetitiveness of the map can throw you off sometimes. You can think you're in one section of the map, or
definitely from the way the game starts. So, like, mechanically speaking, I found this to be very odd, but I liked it from a progression standpoint, because when I finally got it, it felt like I had gotten progressed some and earned it. But, you know, once you get the ability to get a map, not only do you have to buy the map, which is already you also... You just have the map. Then you've got to visit the areas, and it doesn't update in real time. You have to rest, and then you draw into the map. I like it from a mechanical, also from like a realistic standpoint of like, well, you wouldn't be updating your map
and you
on
have
the
to
fly.
find them again too.
Exactly, and you can't even update your map until you go buy Quill.
Yep.
You have to go. Every area has a separate map. To see anything on the map, you have to buy these little waypoint things from the map shop and be able to see yourself.
And luckily
also
those are
takes
cheap,
up
I use a lot of those.
Yeah, but also it takes up a slot for you to see yourself on the map.
Yeah.
Which I just did before I stopped playing.
Yeah, that's one of the most... I think that's always the first thing I do on that map whenever I buy it again. Like, whenever I go play through the game again, that's the first thing, because it makes it so much easier
to
realize where you're at.
It's really interesting to be able to see where you're at in relation to everything else, because sometimes you don't realize how far off or how close to something you actually are. It is.
Like the actual map of the game, or the level.
And like you're talking about, sometimes it's not monotony. I don't know how to describe the word, but yeah, the map design can throw you off sometimes, and you can tell it was on purpose. And there's been a lot of times where I went like an hour of playing without seeing a bench, and I was like, how do I keep missing these benches? And then I'd go somewhere, and it was just under one of the areas I went through. I was like, damn, if I only would have thought I could have gotten a rest point, and it would have been a lot easier.
That's the genius, and like that's why people say that like Dark Souls is one of the best 3D Castlevania renditions there ever is, because like
you
that's
can miss
the same
everything.
thing. I did that 3 or 4 times in Sekiro, where I was like looking, and luckily you can see the little symbol, like the little circular symbol of the shrines through walls in some areas, and I was looking around, I'm like, I had no idea that was even there. The one you get to fight Chained Ogre, right there where you spawn to fight Chained Ogre, is missable. So I actually got the trophy just like 2 days ago.
And how it ties into the verticality of the game from a 3D aspect. But yeah, to me, I think playing Hollow Knight has been one of those things where it's been really enjoyful is what I was going to say, but I've been very much enjoying it. But more importantly, it highlights exactly why, even on a remote play, and this is the weirdest thing, the UI is set up perfectly for remote play. Because, you know, a lot of games when you remote play, the UI doesn't scale adequately, so it looks weird, and you kind of have to just put up with it, even though the rest of the visuals are fine. The UI is so big in that game that it looks right in remote play, and it's all readable. And it just, when I was playing it on Vita, I was like, why? And I know that they had to have weighed the pros and cons against it. They put it on Switch. They're not against putting it on handhelds. They have probably looked at the market. I'm just really surprised, because games like that and indies like that do really well on the Vita, and I feel like there's a crowd that would hop on that game, definitely considering that game's already a year old. They would have hopped on it last year. I'm curious as to why they decided against it, and if it was due to just not wanting to deal with the technological barriers of trying to port a game over.
It's probably that, plus the
well, because Vita has a lot of outdated stuff, and it doesn't support a lot of engines, so you have to literally port it into a new engine to get it to work.
And it's probably weighing all that versus the business side of things, like how much money you could potentially make on the Vita that wasn't exactly populated.
And the other side of that is how massive this game is for how cheap it is. The game was what?
$15.99.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's other games that are a lot shorter. What's the wrestling game?
Guacamelee.
Guacamelee is more expensive and a shorter game, and honestly, less content. Both are good. They have their own places, but I find that interesting that game. I think the game's even down to $10 now.
Probably so.
But it's a really interesting situation. I'm glad I got to start it up, and I love the game so far. And despite the fact that I can't play it on Vita natively, I'm kind of bouncing between playing it on PS4 and playing it on Vita. Partially because right now I'm using my Slim Vita, and I really do. The game has got so much darkness in it that popping on the OLED, it looks really good because the contrast between the blacks that are pure black on the OLED. So if I was using remote play on my original Vita, it'd probably be a closer experience, but I'm not. So
yeah.
you know.
Makes sense.
But yeah, with that said, I think that's all I've played, because then right after that we had to go out of town. I had some other stuff I had to do this week, so pretty good one. But I guess what we'll say real quick is, instead of going directly into the community's take like we normally would right here, due to
the community's take being a poll on Twitter, basically, about the subject of the topic.
I'm okay with it being a poll moving forward in general, but what it is for me is that I think how persistent this topic has stayed. It's something that came up when Sekiro first released, and it's just stayed and stayed and stayed in the talk. So I think it's to the point where it's pertinent that we get around to talking about it at this point, because we've not really said much about it. And I think at this point it's worth going ahead and talking it out in full length. And we got a pretty good response from the community's take with a lot of different ideas. There's I want to explore the reasons that people do and don't believe that it should and shouldn't, that games in general, or Sekiro specifically in this case, should or should not cater to people who are of lesser ability for whatever reason it may be, time, disability, whatever it is.
Yeah,
there's a number of things that can keep you from playing a game that's hard, and these non-difficulty things. So that's something we'll get into in a little bit, but for now I guess we're going to go ahead and just do what we used to do and just go right into the drop, and then we'll hit news up and go from there.
Sure. So for those that don't know, the drop is this week's weekly releases across all platforms. PlayStation, we have Airport Simulator 2019 up first for PS4. We have Constructor Plus for PS4. Dangerous Driving for PS4.
That's the Burnout game. That's from the Burnout devs.
Is it really? I was curious about
the people who founded Criterion left, made that thing, and they made one other game that was similar to that, that's included with that game when you buy it. It's Unreal 4. It looks good, but it also is a low budget game, so it's kind of like a balance. But I think I'm going to try it out when it gets time. Go ahead though. Sorry.
No problem. We have Dark Quest 2 for PS4. Earth Defense Force Iron Rain for PS4. Falcon Age for PS4 and PSVR.
Looks dope.
Ghost 1.0 for PS4. Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Trilogy for PS4.
Saul's
picking that up for Switch 100%. We have Royal Roads for PS4. Shadowgate for PS4. Super Weekend Mode for PS4 and PS Vita, a digital cross-buy title. We have Ultra Wings Flat for PS4. Vapor Rum for PS4. And Zanky Zero Last Beginning for PS4. And that's it for this week. So if you guys are interested in any of those games, always comment and let us know which ones y'all are picking up.
All right, let's see. Time to move over into the news with my dying laptop, but that's fine. Okay, first thing I want to do, and this will kind of act as a faux community's take. All right, yeah, I say that. It's just going to kind of clean up as tie into the last episode. So cleaning up the lingering unknown info from last week's episode, we now know that Borderlands 3 is coming September 13th of this year, as well as what the cover art will look like and the versions of the game available, though the Diamond Collector's Edition has been sold out, sadly. We got to meet our 4 new Vault Hunters in the way of Mose the Gunner. I'm probably supposed to be pronounced Flack, but FL4K, the Beastmaster, which is the robot song.
That's my character, yeah.
It looks so beautiful. I love it. So it's probably going to be mine too, but we'll see how that goes. Amara is the Siren, and Zane the Operative, and saw more of our villains, the Calypso Twins. Lastly, we know that the game will have 4 campaign DLC packs, which is a staple of the series at this point, and a season pass will be available, including access to these 4, as well as the Butt Stallion weapon skin, trinket, and grenade mod. Saul, you have any extra thoughts on that? I mean, we talked a little bit last episode. You kind of ended up here as a separate topic, but still tied into the Borderlands thing about extra content and what it is for games. But an interesting thing about that, and just as a counterpoint to that, obviously games like Borderlands, even Borderlands 1 and Borderlands 2 both got Game of the Year editions, and this was before the online pass thing. And they still kind of did them that way. How do you feel about
season
them?
Pass?
Yeah, how do you feel about them announcing the season pass?
I don't like it. I will never like.
Still the same stance as
still
before?
100% like against this kind of announcements, because you're announcing, and I've said it before, you're announcing content that is included with these DLCs. And I'm not talking about the DLCs, but you're announcing things that have been made to fit in for this, to make it seem like the value is worth it, when DLCs used to not have this kind of value added to it because they were already worth it. And it's coming out near the launch of the game. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I actually didn't get into how close to the launch of the games these are going to start launching, but it does start to
the
feel
fact
like
that they are already announcing it before the game
is
has
enough
launched,
for
with
you.
the release date is enough for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and another one of those that's happening. Control developer Remedy have started talking post-launch plans for their game ahead of their August release. So this is quite a bit.
And that's the thing is that like post-launch games or post-launch plans is something I'm not.
Well, it's because they're saying that there's free
contents.
updates as well as 2 planned expansion packs.
Yeah, well, I mean, even then, free updates are fine. Expansion packs are fine. It's the content bundled in with the expansion pack, the skins, the guns, all that extra stuff.
Well, sure, but I guess the heart of an expansion pass, really, or any of that season pass, is primarily you get a couple of extra things. I noticed on most games, like one of those games that you can look at where this is like the Assassin's Creed series has started having it, and even Far Cry, where in Far Cry 5, if you had the season pass, you got Far Cry 3 Classic Edition.
Now that's pretty cool. That's separate.
It's cool.
That's separate than what I'm talking about. But yeah, that's cool.
But it's them finding odd ways to tie things that aren't related to DLC into it as well, and that was a cool way of doing it. And it was, I mean, interesting. We saw that again with Assassin's Creed Odyssey, where you got Assassin's Creed 3 and Liberation both with it as well, and that's kind of interesting. It's again, like you're saying,
honestly, for like these kind of remakes and remasters, that's not a bad way to do them in my opinion, because like eventually they're gonna go in the store anyways, if not like
soon as. I think Assassin's Creed 3 was as soon as.
Yeah.
I could be wrong on that, but I'm fairly positive because I've seen people already playing it.
Especially if it doesn't deter the price of the season pass. Like if the season pass then becomes $10 more, but you're getting a valued $20 game, you're saving $10 on the game, it makes it worth it.
Yeah.
But for me, it's just like, it seems like all these extras and stuff are just there for furthermore incentives, when the content should stand alone as the incentive to purchase the pass, because the content should be that good. And
I definitely still stand on your side of why does it have to be there. And again, you look at the consumer side of, I don't necessarily need to see that stuff up front personally, and I think every consumer is different. I definitely can see how there's people who would want to look at Borderlands 3 and say, I want to know before I buy it that the game is planning to have 4 DLC packs.
But even then, it's just like, to me, it's like the DLC could be bad. Do you remember the first DLC for Fallout 4?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely can be.
Terrible.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
because it's the quantity doesn't mean there's quality. So like,
that's true.
You're not going to see that DLC content. You're going to see screenshots of it. And if you even start to see stuff like videos of it before launch of the actual game, that's when it's going to really make me mad, because it's like, that really could have been in the game at this point.
Yeah, that's a whole other standpoint.
Yeah.
And now I think sometimes,
I don't think I've ever seen a dev do that though.
I don't know for sure, but even if they did, it'd be okay if it was something that was obviously like, well, this wouldn't have worked in the content of the game because this is like a take on a whole other character or whatever it be. And it's like, okay, well, this is something that has nothing to do with the main story.
If it comes out like 3 or 4 months after, fine. A whole other quarter after, that's fine for that kind of stuff. I don't like it when you advertise it before the game even comes out, and I don't.
I get your point though. Perception, because regardless of whether it would even make sense in the story, the perception easily becomes why wasn't this just in the story, because obvious or in the game, because it's obvious that you already had all this planned out.
Well, see, and the problem is that the people who have the mindset that they need to see a season pass to know if the game's going to be worth investing in my opinion, that's just a terrible mindset to have, because you could look at Destiny 2.
Putting the cart before the horse, a situation.
Destiny 2 launched with a season pass too, and who all kept playing like a month and a half after Destiny 2 after in our group?
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah, nobody.
So, and that's the problem.
And you were one of the people that got the season pass. Now, eventually it came back around to benefiting you.
I got it because it came in my
edition
I got.
But you bought that edition specifically because of that and the steelbook, right? Because isn't that what you got?
Well, it came with the steelbook. It came with like little chest pieces, and it came with. I didn't get the highest one. I got the one that came with.
I knew you didn't get the collectors. Part of the value for you was the season pass as well, because I know.
I mean, that's a justifiable thing in your mind too.
Yeah, sure.
But and that's probably the same thought process and the same, part of the brain work in there when you see all this content in the season pass. Is it's like, well, this is justifiable. If I don't like the content, I get cool skins. But that is where it's, for me, is like, I'd rather have better content than tricked by skins or whatever, because it's just one of those things that's like, I don't like, and I don't think it's a good practice in gaming. It's a great business practice because it works, and that's the problem.
Yeah, we can see that for sure. Okay, well, I thought that was interesting.
Speaking of great business practices.
Well, we'll go a little I think I got out of order on this a little bit, but we'll kind of go towards these. So going back into order, I'll cover these up. Enter the Gungeon, top-down shooter and roguelike, released its final update titled A Farewell to Arms this past week, adding in new playable characters with their own abilities, like all the ones in the existing game, new weapons, new items, and new secret floors and bosses.
For free.
For free. And this kind of goes back to something we talked about a few episodes back where Sean brought up the fact that a lot of these games are adding a lot of value in completely free later as a thank you to fans who already bought the game and also as a catalyst to bring new players in, hopefully. So in this situation, they're like, well, this is our end, but hopefully we get more sales, and this felt worth it. But this is a lot to add to a game, and this isn't the first time they've done it. So it goes to show that how different the markets can really be, and also really how different the expectation of an indie game is to a full release in terms of the fact that regardless of what the cost is, a lot of people will go into an indie game, definitely one like this that doesn't feel like it has a natural end, and say, well, it doesn't matter if it feels finished, kind of like Dead Cells. I had no problem buying Dead Cells and playing through all of it, even though the ending made no sense. It wasn't really, it was just a boss, and no story reason. It felt abrupt. It didn't feel like it resolved anything, but it's about the gameplay.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it was just an excuse for me to get through and have that boss fight. It was the challenge of the moment, which is like those, interestingly.
That's why I like to poke fun about the voice acting in Symphony of the Night, because it's terrible. And yet the game makes up for it by having being a great Castlevania game, cool enemies, cool weapons, all that other stuff.
But it was a point in time where it's like, oh, well, voice acting in games is getting big. We got to have something.
Yeah, something.
Which is funny,
all right.
Because now, but that was also considered a AAA release back then, oddly enough. Whereas now, these types of games don't come out in a AAA fashion,
which is crazy. But that kind of goes back to his statement of like AAA no AAA games are launching at cheaper and sometimes higher quality than AAA games.
Yeah, for certain people. So that's definitely interesting. Next up, and I included this one because I find it interesting for a number of reasons. It's not technically pertinent to PlayStation itself, but it's pertinent to something we've talked about in the past, very recently actually. Right now, rumor has it that Microsoft plans to unveil a bundled Xbox Live Gold and Game Pass subscription for $14.99 a month, alongside its discless Xbox One S that they will be showing off later this month. I'm not surprised to see this bundle. This comes after them experimenting with the bundling during the limited time Xbox All Access thing that they did, where you got a leased console, both of the Xbox Live Gold and Xbox Games Pass bundled together for one monthly price. That was a limited time thing. It was obviously ended up being an experiment. It's funny because at the time people were thinking that, they got some praise and some flack for it, but it's funny to go show how volatile this market really is and how testing that they'll do these things, because that was a very short-lived thing. It got a lot of flack for the way they chose to go about the financing side of it and who they did the financing off of. But it's not surprising, because what it does show me is that Xbox has already thought about what demand is there for bundling these services together. How often do we see, and I'm sure they're saying, how often do we see people who have Xbox Live Gold also already have Xbox Games Pass? Can we bundle them together, make it even more of a value for them to where they won't want to leave either service? It's benefits for staying, customer retention. Then you have things like the fact for new customers that are coming in that you're trying to reach into, be it people who already have PlayStations or Switches or have yet to go into the next gen yet, for whatever reason it be. If they want to go into this Xbox One S that's diskless, it'll be a lower cost of entry because of the not having a disk drive for whatever reason. We don't know how much it's going to be, but it'll be a lower cost of entry. And then you also put something like this together, which is par for the course with a diskless console. Well, you're going to need online because everything is related to online on this console within reason. And you're going to need Games Pass because it's just one more avenue for you to get games, since you don't have the avenue for physical games anymore. So this makes sense as a bundle to me, but this ties in, more importantly, to what we were talking about with what we'd like to see from PlayStation in bundling their stuff together. Now, PlayStation has more services than just these two, so we've talked about it before, there'd almost have to be tiered ones to whether you were going to include PS View along with PS Now, along with PS Plus, and all these different things. But Saul, what's your thoughts on this? Because I know that you were a big advocate towards wanting to see them try and play off of each other, have a little synergy, and say, we run all these things, why can't you buy them on their own if you want to, a la carte, essentially?
Or discounted at bundle.
Or discounted in bundles.
Yeah,
so what do you think?
This right here is, people are going to say, oh, Microsoft is failing, they're bundling these two together because they don't have any players.
Mm-hmm.
This is the best value
Yeah.
ever in the history of consoles to buy a new console and with this value. So if the Xbox One S discless,
Yeah, go ahead. I'm following you.
what price do you put that at?
I think no more than 200.
Well, do you think it's going to be 200? Because the Xbox One S is 200.
No, it's not. Yeah, no, it's not.
Is it not 200?
300.
Okay, so $200.
Because used, they're 249 or 239 for Xbox One S.
Did I just see a really good deal at Best Buy that one day?
I guess. Oh, it depends on when you buy it. They've been as low as 200 on Black Friday and whatnot.
No, this is not Black Friday.
Because don't get me wrong, if I could get one for $200 that had a disc drive, I'd do it just to be my 4K Blu-ray player. And also have the console just to make it easier to play games that I want to play with friends on Xbox, which is rare.
Of course, GameStop, you're the most terrible website in the world that when you see on Google search Xbox One S and you click on it, it goes to the homepage of their website.
Yeah.
But anyways, so let's say $200.
Yeah.
That's what they'll launch at. That's the bundle.
Yeah, but the bundles are all just same cost as a normal.
Okay, so maybe that's what it was. Well, no, I just saw the regular box that didn't come with one, what I traditionally had.
Sure.
So I wonder if that was the SKU they were getting rid of or something, because
Possibly.
that it was $199, and I actually thought about it just for the Blu-ray player. But let's say Xbox One S discless comes out at $200.
Yeah.
For $200, I'd say, depending on where we live, where tax is 10%, but we
Sure.
go to Texas, we'll just call it 10% anyways. If we were to get this for $250 or less, you have a brand new console and you have a pretty decent library of games and you have online paid for.
Yeah. Right out of the gate.
No other console has ever been that cheap where you can get that for brand new with these services.
Yeah.
So, what's the cheapest, what's the cheapest Xbox 360 was ever new that was usable? Don't count the arcade because that wasn't a usable system. That was a big old dumb time.
Yeah. I don't know, man. That's actually a good question. I don't remember because the Xbox Arcade was fairly cheap, but I even think it was $300 at the time because Xbox came out. It
wasn't
$400
$300 at the time.
Was it $250?
It was. I thought it was like $149.
I can't
Because
remember.
it came with the 4 gigabyte external. I say external. It's the 4 gigabyte HD they always had.
Yeah,
but that was not a usable system like that.
The arcade edition, I think, just came with memory cards.
How much was the PS3 ever new for less than 200?
No,
Okay.
or at least not that I saw.
Okay. So this is and this is a pretty good deal for me, honestly. I would recommend anybody if they came to me and said, I have a PS4, should I get an Xbox? Yeah, if you have $250 to spare, you're going to get a pretty good library of games and a decent machine. You're not going to be able to play, 4K Blu-rays on it because it doesn't have a disc drive, but you're going to have a pretty cool machine for that's a good deal. You can't argue that's not a good deal.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's going to bring people in. I'm going to assume if they had any thought of buying an Xbox and they're currently on PlayStation, there might be something like Sea of Thieves they want to play with their friends, or Master Chief Collection, or whatever it may be that's on Xbox that PS4 doesn't have. I would say $250 is a pretty good entry rate for those games that we don't have.
So the Xbox 360 core, just for price comparison, was priced at $299.99.
$300.
Yeah. So
and then Xbox. Well, I'm talking about by the time the arcade had come out, the Elite was
the arcade just replaced the core, and it's the same price point.
Okay, yeah, that's a complete waste of money in my opinion.
Yep.
You got the 4 gigabyte hard drive on it.
Yep.
And they couldn't hold any games. So yeah, good job, Microsoft. That's a good bundle you have there, Sony. I would like you to take
on the console side. Let's just put this in frame of Sony real quick. So on the console side, we've seen Sony go as low with the PS4 as $200. We saw it happen with Spider-Man bundle, which is really a steal during Black Friday times.
And with every new PS4 console, you get 7 days of PS Plus for free.
Yep.
But you don't get PS Now. All right, technically you do get, what is it, a 3-day trial of PS Now?
I think it's 7 days.
Is it 7 days?
Yeah, I think it's also 7 days. It might be 3, but you do get a trial.
So you get a week worth of PS Now and PS Plus for 7 days after you buy the console, so you can at least test out stuff you want, and that's for the Slim, which is comparable to the Xbox One S.
Hold up. I got to add some stuff real quick. While we're on the topic of this, I do want to say that I talked about buying PS Now but not trying it yet. I did decide to try it last week before I started Hollow Knight, just as an in-between thing, and I was like, I just want to see how it works. So I did two things. I looked at how the downloading structure went and how it worked. Just what I thought. It's very simple. You're going through the list of games and it tells you whether there's a download available or not. You can see it on there, and it's a easy symbol, so you can just see an up arrow if you're going through that games. You go, oh yeah, that one's downloadable. This one is. I like that. it made a lot of sense. There's a lot of great games on there. A lot of them are first-party games. Like just an example, I played Loco Roco a little bit with Kyrie because it's a really simple game and it was downloadable. But I also was like, well, let me see, because maybe I'm being too harsh on the Google Stadia. I was like, let me see how my internet here, which is not even really top of the line. It's pretty good internet, to be fair, but it's not top of the line.
In our area.
So I was like, let's see how this goes for me. So I was like, I want to think of what game I want to stream. So I booted up Oblivion. And I know I'm losing forest for the trees a little bit here, but in the talk of PS Now, I played Oblivion, and then I also streamed Sonic Generations. So like, it's a fast-paced platformer. I'm curious as to how it will perform. Oblivion was perfect. It's not that fast-paced anyway, but it was perfect. I mean, I couldn't even tell that it was the delay was so little that it was. I guess technically I can notice it, but it was so little that it didn't impede me in any way. And then when I went to Sonic Generations, it was just ever so slightly, but it was definitely playable, and it made me kind of take back, and I feel like I owe Google Stadia a little bit of apology, because if PlayStation's doing this now 5 years into their service and this is running pretty good on my internet, I mean, honestly, I'm impressed. But
did you try to play any games from the current generation though?
Yeah. Okay. Also streamed. Yeah, I streamed God, what was it? Oh, the game that they remade, Shadow of the Beast, I think is what it was called. It was a remake of a game from the Sega.
Shadow of the Colossus?
No.
Well, no, like what I mean by those, like the Stadia's touting, 10 plus teraflops.
Yeah, sure.
So like what I'm curious about is you're playing typically older, simpler games. Like what I'm curious about is if you downloaded Infamous Second Son.
No, I didn't stream it, but I'll show you this game. This game is not necessarily a slouch. You'd have to see it for a second. It is 2D in that nature. But
no, see, I'm not talking about something that's just 2D. I'm talking about something.
Well, it's not 2D. What I mean is like it's 2.5D. It's a fully 3D game. They just use a 2D, and there's chains and stuff on it. Gotcha. Game's kind of cool. I'm actually kind of glad to end up playing it. But it also played fine, and again, you could see the softness coming from streaming. But
yeah, I'm still kind of iffy on it, but I will say that like Microsoft did what I said Sony should do, and what I think they should do. Obviously, not a business major of any kind, but like they did the right decision. So at least good on them for that.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing to see, but it goes back into this shows me more of what I've been thinking of. Microsoft is getting themselves ready to. I've said this from a long time. Who knows for sure, but their business model to me looks like. Keep being a hardware manufacturer for as long as it benefits us, and keep laying the groundwork to be this service that you're going to be able to play across multiple consoles. You can see it by how buddy they're being with Nintendo. Even going so far as to push for a Nintendo Switch version of Cuphead, which was exclusive for them otherwise. Yeah. We've heard little rumblings of possibly Games Pass coming to Switch in some form fashion.
And you need Xbox Live to play on Switch stuff too, is what the rumor is. So like this being $15 a month, even if you're a Switch owner, is a good deal because Nintendo's
and if it's a bundle, right? At that point, if they're moving away from being just a hardware, then it becomes that Games Pass is altogether just $14.99, but it gives you access to all the Xbox suite and platform on the Nintendo platform.
Well, you're getting the free Xbox, the games with gold.
Yeah, exactly.
And Nintendo's internet is already so cheap, like $12 a year or whatever it is, $20 a year.
Yeah.
So like for that deal right there, if you're a Switch owner, this is a really, really good deal for you. I didn't even think about that until you brought it up.
Yeah. But that's what I mean is that we're seeing Microsoft cozy up to people. This looks like more of what I've been thinking of. I think that we'll see another generation, maybe even two out of Microsoft, depending how things go. But with that said, I still think that they'll always kind of remain a hardware manufacturer in the sense of they can do it pretty easily. And for people who prefer the Xbox controller and UI, bam, they have a system that can do it that way. So they essentially become, they are a third, it'd be the first time I've seen this, but essentially they'd be a third party hardware manufacturing people. They wouldn't have a first party. There wouldn't be exclusives in the sense of to a machine. They don't even really have that now necessarily. Instead, what they have is exclusives to a platform, but the platform can be played on all the machines. And I think that's an interesting take on it. And it would be
you gotta stick around for reader mail that will come out on Monday because or Friday, I mean, not Monday. What am I thinking? Triangle Squared. But
somebody asked a question similar to that.
Somebody asked a question that is essentially, I think it was actually Shawan Neo that asked, but like, what do we see do we see that the next generation, everybody's a winner, where Microsoft is a very high-selling platform, and then Sony is the console, then Nintendo is the handheld?
Yeah, we'll definitely talk more about that then.
Yeah.
Okay, next up,
Sony.
Stretch. Yeah, go ahead. Sony Santa Monica's massively loved God of War brought home 5 BAFTAs, which is the British Arts Film and Television or whatever. Anyway, yeah.
Really left off the easiest part.
But they won the award for audio achievement, music, narrative, best performance for Jeremy Davies as the Stranger, and the big win of best game. So congratulations to them. Game's still doing massively well, right up to a year after its release.
Is his real name in the game still a spoiler?
I consider it. The game's not that new. I mean, the game's not that old, so it's still fairly new.
Yeah, but anybody who knows anything about the lore knows his name, right? Like they could tell by the way he looks.
Maybe. I'm just gonna leave it as the Stranger.
If
you played the game, you know who it is.
Yeah, it's just weird seeing that name.
Yeah. Next up, episode 3 of Life is Strange 2 is coming on May 9th and is titled Wasteland. So if you've been looking forward to that, you have that. Right? A new action RPG for PS4 and other consoles was announced by South Korean game developer Shift Up. Currently titled Project Eve, the game is being developed in Unreal Engine 4 and aiming for a global release. No release window has been given just yet, but if you want to see a teaser of the game, some screenshots of what it looks like, they have that up on YouTube and other sites if you want to check that out. Project Eve. And they announced another game for mobile, I want to say, but pertinent to this. Next thing up, this one's kind of interesting and sad, but not that surprising. Starlink Battle for Atlas, which is a new take on the Toys to Life genre that had players assembling and customizing different real-world physical starships that you could buy and use in the game. They have been considered a massive disappointment in the sales department. Not massive, I'm sorry. They've been considered a disappointment in the sales department, but specifically the toys part is what got them into it. So publisher Ubisoft has made the decision to no longer release physical toys for the game. It seems that the game will continue separately, ditching the Toys to Life aspect of the game, but the developers promise more content is being worked on for the game. So it shouldn't be one of those games like Disney Infinity or, I mean, I think Lego Worlds ended up being this, where it shut down because of how much it relied on the Toys to Life aspect. I've heard from a lot of people the game is fun and the ships are still purchasable separately as entities, as that's kind of its monetization extra. And the game still seems to be doing well as a game. It's just that the money it takes to move into this games to life thing is so high. It's a huge investment and it's hard to make back.
I'm going to say something that is going to be very two-sided, but number one, Toys to Life games, stop doing them. They're not successful in this day and age. Nobody plays with toys anymore. 2, Atlas is the coolest game to have ever used that, and I want those toys because of how cool they are.
Dude, it took every bit of me not to do it because it's so cool looking.
Every time I go to Target, I still pass the it's the I don't know what it's called. It's like the collector's edition. It comes with the set, and it's like $60. I'm like, that is so dope to get this little set of toys plus the game. And I'm a 27-year-old man saying I'm excited about toys.
No, dude, me too. And honestly,
they're the coolest. But stop doing it because you have to end it eventually, and then it's just bad for everybody who likes it.
Sadly, the best news about this is that if I want to get these, they're going to price drop soon.
Yeah, they're really cool, like collectible toys. So once again, as an almost 30-year-old man.
Next up, after being censored in Western releases, DMC 5, or Devil May Cry 5, in case you have any stink about me saying DMC, but Devil May Cry 5's censorship has been removed from the North American version of the game via a quiet patch. The European version remains unchanged with no word on if that will change, considering that this wasn't even a planned thing. It was just something that people found after the patch for North America. But this comes on the heels of a lot of complaints towards Sony over something we talked about last year. This is in regards to the censorious nature of its policies that they put into action last year as a worldwide step. I'm glad to see this because it means that there's some flexibility to this. Interesting that it's not done in Europe yet, and I'm wondering why. And lastly, I'm wondering how much Sony's going to peel back some of these censor policies. There's probably a happy middle ground between what Sony wants on its policy side that it enacted from the get-go and what gamers want, to where they can kind of come to a point where, for most people, hopefully, it's a non-issue. Hopefully.
It should be.
But
they've never made an official statement on this either, which is interesting.
Yes. It was just a policy that got pushed out, and they kind of just went, meh.
Yeah. I'm glad it got fixed, though.
Well, and this is one of those weird things.
After I beat the game.
Why did it come quietly? What was the reasoning for it in the get-go? And did the pushback that they got off of it have the effect on why it got removed?
I'll say you notice it came after all the controversy happened. It's like they fixed it in a response.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, but why? Was it because of literally just
I think that they might have realized that like stuff made, in the East, like where they have their own ethics and ideals, like you don't need to censor that if it comes over here because that's their culture. Leave it alone.
And it's really against.
You approved it to look like that in one culture. Don't disapprove it for the other. It's dumb.
And I agree with you there.
The game is the game.
We do look at that from a very American standpoint. So for us, we look at it as we have a ton of freedoms. Essentially, that one of the ones that we really think about though is something like this. You're free to make and kind of put what you want to out there, like that game, that hatred game that got. I mean,
for people with a lot of freedom, everybody gets angry at everything,
right? But that's almost why we have the freedom to say so. It ends up being that, and people want to censor things, which is funny. We're in an odd climate.
Freedom of speech,
but. Moving it over here, what the point of that's supposed to be is that we're supposed to be able to, in our mind, we're supposed to be able to openly celebrate it. So it is interesting. I wonder if the reason it's not done in Europe is because there are some censorship and laws that you can't say anything you want to over in Europe. There are repercussions to saying things, even if it's just words. So I wonder if it has something to do with that. If this is trying to do. Are Sony backing off of the worldwide censorship policies and instead going, we're going to start censoring based off of what is considered a cultural norm in the areas that we're doing it? And it might be that Europe is saying, well, we don't consider the cultural norm to not censor. I don't know enough about Europe, so I would say that I know we have a bunch of fans that listen to us. So Sean, Matt, all you guys, both the Seans we have, I'd be interested to hear why, in your opinion, that from a cultural standpoint, does it feel like this is going on, and how much has the censorship affected y'all in general? I think that's odd. It depends on the type of games you like, of course, too. But let me know how off I am on that, because this is us going from a very North American standpoint on this versus we don't know a lot about y'all's culture. It's a very different situation. So I'd be interested to hear what those are. A couple things left though. Iron Man VR, which we recently talked about and was shown at the during PlayStation's first State of Play they did. It's been revealed to be far more than a short VR experience, which I'll be fair is kind of what it looked like from the way they showed it. With people in the media being able to go hands-on with the game, we hear that it's to be a full game with free movement flying controls, an original story of a decent length. I couldn't find it again, but I want to say I saw something around 8 to 10 hours, which is not bad. A non-linear sandbox, and groundbreaking flight controls that mimic Iron Man's thrusters pretty cleverly. I actually like this. So players will aim the controllers down and pull the triggers to simulate liftoff. So it's like the end of the glowy balls are Iron Man's hand thrusters.
Yeah.
And you aim them down, you pull the triggers to take off, you tilt them back to move forward. If you want to stop, you fling them forward. And whenever you want to do attacks, you keep one hand down and you pull the other hand up to do your blast, and you can switch hands. But if you want to keep flying, you have to have a hand behind you.
Well,
and you can do full 360 moves and stuff,
Considering he has feet that can also do that. So couldn't you just set like an autopilot button and then bring your arms up?
I think from a gameplay perspective, if you want to control it, that's kind of what they end up doing. Is it
weren't they using two hands in the trailer though?
I mean, you can still and then you can
I thought
go back and
both
forth.
Hands being present.
Maybe. I don't know, but one of the biggest concerns is that the way they showed it, and I get that it's really hard to show VR and your intent with it. A lot of people were concerned that it was going to be an on-rails game, and it's not. And that's good. I appreciate that.
That is good.
Because it does look very easily like an on-rails thing when you're seeing it, and it turns out that what they were saying was not gameplay, was the cutscenes in between. So all the bits that we saw was considered gameplay. It was just a specific section. But everybody seems to be having a good time with it. They say it looks really good. It's been being worked on for the last 2 years, which is pretty interesting. Apparently, this came as Marvel was looking for something in the VR space, and the people who ended up making this, I think, is Republic Games, if I remember right. They decided to pitch this idea to Marvel, and they went along with it. So this has been in the works since before Spider-Man was officially announced.
Can we please get an actual Iron Man game though that's like not VR, that's on the caliber that Spider-Man was?
It may happen. This is very much
still a 7 out of 10.
This is very much in Marvel's realm. They have to let it go, but
really want like a Iron Man game that's not VR.
Sure.
That plays that has that fluidity of Spider-Man.
Yeah, and lets you fly around. And the thing is,
Anthem.
It's even more after Anthem. I think a lot of people, for all the flaws that Anthem has, or that some people may perceive as flaws since everybody's different, I think the one thing that's pretty universally found is that the flying mechanics are pretty dope.
Honestly, now the Avengers movie verse has entered in such a plateau that like you could probably make pretty decent superhero movies modeled after those actors after Endgame, depending on the way Endgame ends.
Yeah, sure. You could still make...
So that way you're not doing those weird movie games where the story kind of lines up, but then there's all this dumb side stuff that doesn't happen in a movie. Like Harry Potter games were like the worst about that. Those were good games. But like,
you have to.
It goes for every movie game that has ever came out.
Because a movie is 3 hours max, and who wants to play a 3 hour game?
Yeah, but it just feels unnatural when you do that kind of stuff.
It does. It feels obviously added.
Yes,
in a weird way.
It feels like it's padded for that reason.
Yeah, I'll give you that. A couple more things though. Square Enix has announced that Naoki Hamaguchi, hope I said that right, will be stepping into the role of co-director alongside Tetsuya Nomura for Final Fantasy VII Remake. Interesting that they brought this out as news out front. It seems like they're not being coy about talking about Final Fantasy VII, which makes me wonder how close we are to actually seeing it. If it was massively behind schedule, you would hope, or you would think, that they would be a little more coy about trying to put this information out there.
Yeah, I'm worried because I'm worried that they're bringing in Naoki because they are so far behind or they haven't gotten to a good point yet to put anything out.
I don't know.
I hope I'm being just pessimistic about it.
Well, the reason I say that is that there was a co-director on Kingdom Hearts as well.
Right.
So that's not uncommon.
It wasn't Tetsuo started out with Kingdom Hearts before Final Fantasy VII, right?
Yes.
3 specifically.
Yes.
So what I'm curious about is that the team that got booted off, what was that team called again? It was a company.
Oh, CyberConnect.
Yes. I'm wondering if they got booted off, and then we do know that pretty much redevelopment started.
Yeah, it moved in house. They didn't. They weren't able to save a lot of it. They wanted to redo it.
Year ago?
More than that. More than that. So there was. We've
been doing the podcast for 2 years.
Hold on. There was rumors before that. Because you got to think about this. CyberConnect were the people that was announced when the game was announced in 2016. We weren't doing the podcast in 2016 yet. Oh, was it 15?
2015.
God. Yeah, either way.
We were doing the podcast in 2016, weren't we?
I don't think so.
Wasn't that Shadow of Colossus E3?
No, that was 17.
I'm so old. Like
that was hashtag free the nips time, Saul.
That was.
But listen.
Okay, so maybe it was 2016.
So anyway, regardless of which one it was.
No, because that was Horizon Zero Dawn and God of War.
Okay, yeah, you're right, actually. So it was 2015, along with Last Guardian and Shenmue 3. But
Fallout 4.
Yeah, but anyway, with that said,
that was pretty
you got to think about it. When the game was announced in, that was when CyberConnect were the ones that we were told were working on it.
Right, but I thought...
The rumors that came up last month or last year were really up in the air, and it was found out that wasn't true. CyberConnect had already been out of the picture for over a year at the point that those rumors had come in.
Right, but I thought that...
So the rumors themselves are true in the fact that CyberConnect did get off the game.
Yeah.
CyberConnect, they scratched most of what CyberConnect were doing, if I remember that correctly. I'm pretty sure that's it. But it had happened about a year and a half prior to what the rumors last year were saying. So they've been working on it now for roughly 3 years at this point. Okay. That doesn't seem that weird. It's not a brand new game that they're having to figure out story and everything for. What they're instead having to do is...
They're having to figure out one part of the story.
They're having...
I don't think that part's going to make it in the game.
Yeah, we'll see. Because fans have been talking about it since it was announced.
Yeah, I thought about it like a couple months after it got announced. I was like, that's not going to be in the game.
We'll see. But with that said, I get your concern, but I think at that point, when you look at a game like this, Kingdom Hearts 3 is a new game with real story and real mechanics they're trying to figure out. This is taking something that already has a city, a story, characters all lined out. Thankfully, there's something that they have.
Everything is lined out.
They have a framework, is what we call it. Now, with them changing the way the game is going to play and fleshing out all these areas, that does matter.
Be done. Yeah,
but 3 years seems like a reasonable point in time to get that out.
It does.
So I think that we might.
I hope.
There was also some rumors or something, or some reports that Square Enix still had a big game for 2019 fiscal year, which ends April 1st of next year.
They did not specify a release or a reveal.
We also don't know what it is. It could be anything. But
it could
it
be
sounds
Final
like
Fantasy 16 announcement is what that alluded to.
Well, no, whatever it was, if I'm looking at the rumors right, it involved money because they were talking about that they'll break because they have one more big game that's going to hit their thing.
They announced Final Fantasy 16 stock, their stock goes up.
I don't know.
Final Fantasy 16
I don't
trailers,
know. Maybe I don't know enough about that, so I'll give you that. But either way, it'd be interesting to see if it's going to be that. So why you got to keep stretching? You ain't drove 3.5 hours today.
I felt like I did.
All right, last thing up is something we ended up talking about in the Discord a lot. Sony has announced a change in its refund policy and brings up name changes at the same time, with their statement being, you can cancel, quote, you can cancel a digital content purchase within 14 days from the date of purchase and receive a refund to your PSN wallet, provided that you have not started downloading or streaming it. Digital content that you have started downloading or streaming and in-game consumables that have been delivered are not eligible for a refund unless the content is faulty. You can cancel your purchase of a season pass within 14 days from the date of purchase and receive a refund to your PSN wallet, provided that you have not started downloading and or streaming any digital content, e.g. game add-ons, included with the season pass. Now, this applies to pre-orders, which is actually an upside. Subscription services, also an upside. It means that if you get PlayStation Now within 14 days, if you don't ever use it and you just decide you don't want to do it, bam, you go right on back. And this also, this does not cover name changes once they go live. So the interesting thing about this is they brought up name changes. They are talking about the fact that they're still working on them. So my hope is that the beta period, and I know a lot of people are upset about this, but the beta period seemed to it seemed to do exactly what we thought it was going to do. It brought up a lot of issues that I think Sony knew they had to put into beta to see what the issues were and why they were happening. And from there, Sony's doing everything they can to make the best possible name change thing they can. It's probably still not going to be perfect. There's almost no way, I can guarantee there's almost no way it's going to be perfect. But if they can get it out of the door with minimal problems, great. Outside of this, Saul and I were talking. This seems like a step in the right direction, but it's not quite on the solid ground that we were hoping that they'd land on. Because what this does do, and I'll start with the benefits, being able to cancel or, technically get a refund on a pre-order is a great thing. The fact that wasn't there already was kind of a big oversight. So that's great. Before the product gets to you, bam, this is in line with that thought process. You pre-order a game, something happens, you decide that you're not into it anymore. Instead of having to do the old thing where you hope that for some reason the pre-orders go weird and Sony cancels them all, and then you have to re-pre-order, which has happened a couple times. Instead of having to hope that happens, you can just go, I don't want this game anymore. Bam, get my refund. That's a good thing. The fact that you can even get a refund within 14 days, interesting. Good to know. But why the weird stipulation that you can't even start downloading it?
Here's the thing. There's not clear in this policy. If I download the Dark Souls 4 Season Pass.
Sure.
Don't start the Season Pass or anything. They say 14 days, yet I have Dark Souls 4 downloaded. Can I refund the season pass?
It should, because essentially they should be able to look and say whether or not you've used the
How
content.
can I use the season pass 14 days before it comes out?
Well, hold on. So what
You can
I must have
refund
misheard your question.
Yeah, you can refund the season pass 14 days before it comes out. Yet it alludes to not having. You can't do it unless you have downloaded content.
You can purchase a season pass and you can refund it within 14 days of the date of purchase. Doesn't matter if it's before it comes out.
Oh, okay. I see what that is now.
Yeah.
I was thinking of it as if you were pre-ordering it.
Yeah.
So you can, but if you pre-order the season pass,
you can also cancel.
Can you refund it if you played the game that relates to the season pass, or if you have a download?
I don't know about that one, and I don't know if the policy is more clear outside of the statement. It might be when you actually look at the policy.
Who in the world downloads a game? I mean, just that right there. Who buys a game and doesn't download it?
See, that's the bigger thing, because a lot of the time refunds happen.
Download is
most people buy a game and start downloading in the same moment.
Exactly.
So
even if you have a backlog, you download it so that in time to play it for your backlog, it's there.
Yeah.
This is a dumb policy. Like, it's a step in the right direction because they're opening up to refunds. They botched the policy. I said this on Twitter on April 1st.
Yeah.
And then I deleted it because we were doing woodworking things that day and only woodworking things.
Yes.
This is, like I said, there's cool stuff in here. And it is stuff such as the refunds, brilliant. However, what happens when the game starts to preload? Are you done for because it's downloading?
Do games start to preload without your permission?
Preload starts for most games like 4 days before the game comes out.
See, I've never pre-ordered a game digitally.
I don't know
so I don't
if
know.
it preloads without your permission, though.
I know that it opens. I thought that you had to click on it and say you wanted to preload. But I don't know.
I've done this before. I did this for
Okay.
Sekiro,
It
Red
shouldn't.
Dead. I can't remember.
It shouldn't, because it is still at that point. It's still, until the game is released, it's still considered a pre-order.
But if it preloads, and
I get you're saying because of their wording.
It's preload like 3 days before the game comes out.
Yeah.
and it preloads, can you refund the game before the game comes out, or do you have to stop the preload?
The argument should be that before the game comes out, you're still covered. Now it gets messier after that.
Yeah, it's not specifically stated in here.
Sure.
And that's what I'm curious about. As someone who buys digital games,
yeah.
Say if I did it with Anthem, Red Dead, and Sekiro. Let's say with Sekiro, somebody got the game early and said, "Oh, the game doesn't even run at 10 FPS. It's very, very bad. It doesn't work." I'm like, "Let me go."
And day before, you're wanting to cancel.
Yeah, and it preloaded. Can I cancel that preload?
Yeah,
can I refund my?
You would
money?
hope so, but that's something that that hopefully the policy goes into, and if not, now this does bring us to one thing that it needs to be said. So we've always talked about that this needs to be something that's in line with Steam's policy and Xbox's policy now that they've also done it. Steam was the first to do this. But here's the difference for Sony. While this, again, is a step in the right direction and that these are good within reason, I mean, there are still, it could be better, but there are some good moves forward with this, but you still can't do it, unlike on Xbox and Steam where you just go into it and it's an automated process. You still have to call for this.
Right, and
which is a huge. It seems weird. Why not get to a point where it's automated? And does this tie back into the thing where we've talked about their network is just so old that can they not automate the process?
I can't. I deleted the tweet, like I said. I'm looking through Twitter notifications to see because I can't remember who responded to this. I'm pretty sure it was Jeff who responded to me, but I can't remember. But somebody. I should be close because all those woodworking channels are following us on Twitter now. But what they said was that what stops somebody from going offline and then beating the game and then coming back online? Sony knows the game time you've played. They gave us a video at the beginning of the year that showed us that. So they have that information on the back end. Not only that, but trophies sync back up. They would know that you logged into this game and that they could even put not artificial, but rules on trophies. Like, well, this trophy right here is as you beat the first boss, that's within 2 hours of the game, you're good. But then if it's like the third boss or whatever, like you can't get to that within 2 hours of the game. Sorry, we can't do a refund. But I did. Sorry, that's our policy. It gets messy that way. But
sure.
Even then, they could see the trophies sync up. It doesn't have to be one of those things. Guaranteed, they have your playtime on the back end you can't see. And it might do a couple days worth of digging on their end to find that playtime and to get it. But
why does that not tie into? And again, if it was automated and there was a system that looked and go, what game is it? Why is he refunding it? When was the date of purchase? And on the back end server, how does it show? How long does it show he's played the game? That would be the automated. And that's what Xbox and Steam do. They do all that automated. They just look at the game, look at the date of purchase, and look at from the back end system how long it says you played it. Well, if they all meet within the stipulations of what it is, it automatically does it. If you want to argue it, you can push it through to a representative and do that. Sony has to do everything through a representative, and it still seems like
that process can be cut.
Yeah.
You know what's crazy?
Good.
I'm 99% sure they can log your hours played offline too.
Well, when you sync back up, yeah, probably.
I wouldn't think that they could because they're not currently, they don't have that information. But I'm pretty sure that works because I know that from when I looked at the my year for last year on PS4 and they did that video for Americans finally. Yeah. And Dark Souls 3 was my third highest game. I played a lot of that on the very first patch offline to avoid the patch from downloading.
Sure.
To use the glitches and stuff in there while trying to speedrun.
Yeah.
They knew that. They knew that I played that game offline. So when it came back up, that time did sync. So they have that information.
Yeah.
They could make this. It's just they don't want people to start abusing it. But the thing is, it's just like Steam. You get banned from refunds if you abuse it.
Yeah.
You download My Name is Mayo and you get the platinum. I wonder if there's even a system that they have that can take that platinum away from you.
I don't know about that.
Or blacklist you from the game where you can't download the game again.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But the last thing I'll say about this is also kind of this is, again, an upside. So Sony's stance whenever the Anthem problems were going on, a lot of people were saying you could get a refund. And then when people were trying, it turned out that wasn't completely the truth. One of the things that this does go towards is it does put in the stipulation that as long as the product is not faulty, these are the rules. But you are eligible for a refund past that if the content is faulty.
What's the deal with...
Or what I mean is not past that. It's still within the stipulations, but you can have downloaded it and started playing it, and if it's faulty, as long as it's within the 14-day window, they'll still give you a refund.
What is the deal with video games, and why do they have to be faulty? Like, why in their mind do that to be faulty?
Yeah, what's the justification for it's faulty? I think it would have to be how often is your playtime up? And the bigger thing I think that you're trying to get to is who determines this, and is it made clear somewhere where you can know that calling it is going to guarantee your refund, or are you just wasting your time?
Well, I'm just saying, like, even then, if I buy a shelf at Walmart and I don't put it together, it ends up sitting in my apartment for like a week, and I'm just like, I'm not going to use this thing. I'm going to take it back. They're going to ask, is anything wrong with it? If I say no, they're not going to deny that refund because there's nothing wrong with it because I still have my receipt.
Yeah.
What's the issue with it having to be faulty? It's a game. It's like,
I agree on that.
And the thing is that
I agree on your logical standpoint.
Well, games are universal. So, like, if it's faulty for me, chances are it's going to be a little faulty for you. If it's faulty enough that I would want a refund on it, it's going to be faulty for you to do that to some extent, right? A game...
I don't know, because let's go back to our primetime example, Anthem. A lot of the problems that the people who were saying they were trying to get a refund for were experiencing, it seemed like it's exactly what you're talking about. What it really was just a bunch of people who just kind of feel like they just bought a game that didn't end up clicking with them, or they bought it, enjoyed it a little bit, and were trying to take advantage of the fact that they heard that Sony was giving refunds. They're like, well, I got my time out of it. Let me refund it, get my $60 and buy something else. I think for the most part, I know that there were real people who had real problems, and for people who had and we did learn that the system did not actually brick any console. The game did not brick any console. It would just hard boot consoles, and you'd have to go through and rebuild your database and come back in. You were fine. But that's an actual problem to an extent where I think if you could prove that happened to you within reason, then you should be able to get a refund. But on the other side of that is, just to your example, you said if the game is so faulty that one person's asking for a refund, shouldn't it be like that across the board?
They know it's faulty. That's the problem.
But that comes down to it. Anthem didn't give me any of those problems. So that's why I think it comes down to what's faulty, and I think there has to be some line for Sony, and I think they'll probably base it a little bit off of what's going on. So like in the Anthem case, they probably would have looked at the fact that a lot of people were saying that they experienced problems, and they just would have done it just to do it. Now, I almost wonder if this refund policy comes on the heel of Anthem.
But like my problem is that why does faulty matter if it's within 2 weeks?
I agree.
That's the thing, though. Is like,
but we're talking at this point, or at least I'm talking about the policy as it is. I kind of get it. On your side, what is faulty and what isn't faulty, and why should it even matter in the product of if you are within the time period, why should it matter? The only thing about that, their policy, the only reason that doesn't work is because their policy does not have any kind of playtime stipulation. Their only stipulation is whether you downloaded it.
Well, I'm saying in my perfect policy for them, which would mirror Steam, they don't care about the faultiness of a game.
Yeah.
There's a couple of options where you choose from, and I was trying to go to it, but like I on my laptop, but I'm actually kind of worried that like I don't want to refund a game or try to submit a ticket and waste somebody else's time for a game I don't want refunded. Because Grand Theft Auto 5 is the only newer game that I have in there from 2 weeks. Sure. But my whole thing is like I'm about 99% sure you don't have to have a reason. Like you could put a couple like game doesn't run well, or game the specs for my computer cannot run this game or whatever. But I had Republic Commando, which is an old Star Wars first-person shooter game on Steam. That's one of the games I've refunded in the past on Steam. And I just didn't I downloaded it, and I'm like, I'm not going to play this like I thought I would. And then I just submitted a refund ticket for it, and I'm pretty sure I just hit no reason on refunds. Or like just didn't want it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, like within, I think 2 hours or 3 hours, I got an email saying that they're being looked at. And then about 2 or 3 hours later, I got another email saying it was refunded. So
yeah. Now, I'll say this. In regards to that, we're dealing with a couple of different things. So on Steam, you are dealing with the fact that all computers could be different. So there's a number of ways that can come into that. But
which is what
I think both of these, the thing about Steam and Xbox is that faulty always exists on the side of when you exceed the original boundaries within reason. So the boundaries on all of them now, thankfully, besides Nintendo, I don't know enough about Nintendo's, but at least on Steam, PlayStation, and Xbox. When you're looking at those, the refund policy is all within a 14-day window. Now, that's the farthest reaching thing.
That should be. That's a pretty good.
Yeah, it is. Limit. Now, outside of that, 2 of the 3 in this situation have the limiting stipulation outside of that
of playtime
of 2 hours or more, or 2 hours or less, if it can get you refunded. PlayStation does not. PlayStation draws that line at whether you download it or not. Now, here's the thing. Within that, faulty matters outside of that first stipulation. So in PlayStation's first stipulation, they're saying well, you broke our first stipulation because you downloaded it. But if the game is faulty, even past that, as long as you're within the furthest reaching stipulation, which is the 14 days, we'll still refund you. Steam and Microsoft are actually the same on that. They'll look at
PlayStation does.
Where faulty comes in. Hold on. This is just tying into your why does it matter if it's faulty? Where faulty comes in, and even though those other two platforms is the same thing. And it's if you've played more than 2 hours of the game, and it matters if it's faulty because you don't always know a game is faulty within your first 2 hours. Be it because you have a tutorial that goes into, if it's an online heavy game that you don't realize that they have a ton of server issues and you're not going to be able to play it, whatever it may be, it's to that faulty moniker matters on getting it within the middle of the two. So you've already broke the first stipulation because you played it more than 2 hours, but after that 2 hours, you found out it was faulty. That's where the line matters for those two. Sony's line matters as in, well, you downloaded it. Even though you downloaded it, you found it's faulty.
But faulty doesn't mean anything for Sony because you wouldn't know because you can't download it anyways, as per their refund policy.
But what I mean, it only matters if it's faulty because that's their only stipulation as to why you should be able to get one outside of that. Now, I guess what you're saying is that Sony just shouldn't have the stipulation about the downloading, which I mean we agree on that.
Yeah, that's my whole thing.
But the faulty thing exists across all three is all I'm getting at.
Right.
Is that there is a reason that's there because just to juxtapose what we have going on, Josh Ayers in the Discord has talked about that because of the laws in Australia and what goes on over there, they have to do it within, and theirs is a large window too, but it doesn't matter what the reason. I think it's within a week, maybe it's 2, but you get a refund, no questions asked because of their policies.
Yeah. I'm just going to switch my Xbox to Australian and call them with an accent and see if that works. My PlayStation. Did I say Xbox?
Use a VPN.
Yeah. Did I say Xbox?
Yeah, you did.
Okay, yeah, PlayStation.
But I mean, unless I'm really misunderstanding you, I think we're seeing it the same way. It's just,
we are. It's just that's my thing.
I get that the faulty thing is just bothering you because of the download. Is that you're saying
that you would know it's faulty because you've already you can't refund it because you broke the first main stipulation they have.
But that's why the faulty comes in. It's the only reason it exists.
Right. But the thing is that are they going to refund you just based off as the game faulty?
Yes, they should.
They should, but will they?
No, that's what it says, unless the game is faulty. So their wording is set up to say, if the game is faulty, the first stipulation no longer matters.
Okay, then that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'll read you the thing. It says specifically that have been, let's see, right here. Unless it's considered faulty. If they've been delivered or downloaded, are not eligible for refund unless the content is faulty. So they're not eligible once they've been delivered and downloaded and all that, unless they're faulty. So the faulty only exists to get you past if you broke the first stipulation, but you're still within the second stipulation, which is 14 days, they're going to give you that refund as long as they can deem it as faulty. Now, the bigger question there is who determines whether it's faulty or not. That's in my opinion, that's the question. Who gets to determine if it's faulty? Does the publisher of the game have to say, well, we consider our game to be faulty, so if anybody calls for it, you can go ahead and give them it? Or is it on PlayStation to make that decision? Or is it based off of the reason you give?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of wiggle room there that I don't think is clearly enough put here. And that's one thing that I'm hoping that if I can actually get and I probably will look and see actually after this, what the policy, if there's an extended version, what it says.
Yeah.
Because some of that matters.
What is faulty? Is it a frame rate drop every now and then?
Yeah.
Because that's not faulty in my eyes. But if it runs at 10 frames per second, that's pretty faulty.
Yeah.
But is Sony going to agree that that's faulty or not? Because the game works.
And the other thing is if you're getting it at 10 frames per second, but I'm not, even though we're both on PS4 Pros, your game is still faulty at that point, no matter what.
And what I'm curious about faulty is like corrupted download, corrupted game, something like that.
Yeah.
It's too broad of a term.
It is.
So I'm waiting on more information. But right now, good step in the right direction, Sony. For at least the mindset. Let's work on the policies a little bit better.
Okay, so I have to, because my throat is just so dry, I have to run and get a water.
Sure, I'll lead into the main topic.
You just go ahead.
Sure. So for those that follow us on Twitter, we put out our community's take topic on Twitter as a poll, and we basically read the poll and Facebook. I see, I didn't know that because I don't have Facebook. But what our poll was is it's, in light of the ever-continuing debate, do you feel like From Software should add an easy mode to Sekiro or any of the other games? Feel free to reply explaining why. And, of course, the poll ran with a total of 62 votes. It ran at 79% of people said no, they should not add an easy difficulty. And then 21% said yes. Now, my math for that was that 13 people said yes, and then the rest were no. So We got a pretty good amount there that do not want any kind of easy difficulty added into the game of any kind. And the way I think that we should go about this particular topic, which I think is going to be the most easy and kind of the easiest flowing way as well, is that you can follow along with us, and we're going to read through each question or each reply, and then we can give our input on that reply, and then by the end, you guys will know where we stand just based on our replies, and then we'll wrap it up with our total thoughts.
Yeah, we did get a lot of replies, so I don't know if I'll do every single one of them. Do you think we should do every one of them? Or
well,
at least,
I will say that like we could do,
because some of them mimic each other is why I say that.
Yeah,
so
that's
I think
true.
we have to use the ones that have the most pertinent points for both sides.
Yeah, and a couple are actually really long chains of responding to each other.
Yeah,
so with getting the context of the full conversation, we would have to read those as well.
So since I missed your thing, did you already cover?
I covered the poll and I covered the voting.
What the poll got
13 people said no, and then the rest were saying yes. So at least is what the math worked out. Even the math on that's kind of weird. It was 13% said no.
Okay, so hold on. So was the?
No, I'm sorry. 13 point something people said yes on here. Basically, I just took 21% and divided that.
Okay, yes, I got
21% of 62. And it was 13 point something.
All right, so across the board, no was the winner of the poll.
Yeah,
be it across Facebook and Twitter. It was a pretty good win across the board. So. No is largely in favor. Now, I definitely want to go over why some of these issues are. I do think it's important to say that it does seem like gaming community at large is saying no, but the reasons I've found have varied very differently. And I have one reason as to why, in my opinion, and we'll get to that in a minute, the side that I side with, for now I'm going to remain nonpartisan, the side that I stand with, the one reason that I think is the most salient reason over everything else. I think it's the most important reason, and I'll get into that. And I think that everyone should be able to reasonably agree, even if they still wanted it. I think that it's just the thing that matters the most. But we'll get into some of these other ones real quick. I'll start with one from Facebook, since you've already been talking a little bit about Twitter. So the first thing I'll say is Hayden Evans, and that's one of our listeners, if I'm not mistaken, from Australia. So speaking of Josh in Australia, there we go. He says, only if easy mode enables a camera that isn't garbage. So, and he goes further into it, because I did prod, because I was curious. I said that's the only easy mode feature you need. And he does go into it. He says, I personally don't want an easy mode, but I'm not opposed to the idea of one for other players. I think FromSoftware are competent enough, which I think they are as well, to make their games more accessible for those who don't have enough skill and patience to, quote, get good, end quote. I can still have my experience while others can have theirs. Now, I've seen this particular sentiment echoed through most of the people that have given the answer to yes. As to it seems to be that yes is either for people who think that they themselves would directly benefit from it, or that they don't feel that it being there is going to detract from their enjoyment of the game, because in this situation that we're talking about, there would still be the normal version of the game given. You know what I mean? So I see that sentiment echoed a lot. But Saul, do you want to grab one from Twitter that's in the no category, so we can kind of put two of them side by side and kind of look at that?
Sure. Our good buddy Jason says, I feel that it'll take away what makes those games special and unique. If you give players a difficulty option, it'll become another action RPG. Not sure if that's the genre, but hope you understand. So yeah, basically if you add a difficulty into the game, then there's nothing to distinguish the series that's special, that's not part of the game. That's just
then it's just another action RPG.
Yeah, it's what is it, or around the game? No. Can't think of what it's called.
I mean, it just depends on what you're talking about. But I mean, there can
stigma around the game.
That's what I figured you were going to say, a stigma. But do you mean stigma is normally used in a negative regard?
Yeah. So like, then like, what's the overall word for stigma that's not negative? I can't think of it.
Like the tone of a game.
Yeah, that'll work, I guess. Yeah.
I mean. Well, let's instead of focusing on the word, verbalize your point. Verbalize that point and how it mirrors with yours.
Well, he's correct on that. The difficulty and the challenge of these games is always what is talked about in them. As a matter of fact, Dark Souls has earned its name not only because of the game series, but because now it is a very cliche thing to do in gaming journalism to relate a game to being Dark Souls-like. And it's successful in that way because you automatically understand what that term means even if you've never played a game before.
And there's two things of that. So that's actually that's a really good point right there, Saul, is the fact that journalism do it in two ways. So journalism will say, and this is a term of endearment that or just a term really that they use to do it, but it can be a term of endearment, but Souls-like has become a defining thing. Now, they typically use that when they refer to a game that also not only copies the aspect of difficulty, but also some of the aspects like having a bonfire or something that acts as a bonfire that you come back around to, and something that also utilizes replenishing enemies with a system that's built on you gaining souls that you lose
Death
if you
Gambit,
die.
Neo, Salt and Sanctuary.
Exactly. So then the other side, and I think this is more of what Saul was talking about, you kind of get to this point where, and I don't know if y'all remember back in the day, it's not that long ago, but whenever Skyrim came out, everything after Skyrim, everything after Skyrim was like Skyrim with blank. So
people still say Red Dead Redemption Yeehaw Skyrim.
Yeah. So I don't know if y'all remember this. Far Cry 3 was called Skyrim, like Skyrim with guns. That was a quote from somebody. So what that was is that they're trying to talk about the scope and scale of the thing, and that's what they're going after. And it's like, okay, well, that's the defining factor they saw for that. The defining factor that some people use when they say, well, it's the Dark Souls of platformers. What they mean by that is that Dark Souls is known far and wide and first and foremost specifically for its difficulty. So people will use a game that has nothing in common with it outside of that mechanically just to say it's the Dark Souls of racing games. It's the Dark Souls of platforming games. It's the Dark Souls of puzzles.
First-person shooters.
Yeah, it's
Cliff Bleszinski.
All it means to them is that they have made a game that has decided to be difficult for whatever reason, and that's what they're trying to use it for. So I think that's actually a good point, Saul, is that it does bounce out between both. I mean, there are people that it's so synonymous with Dark Souls and even From Software difficulty is that when you see a From Software game, 9 times out of 10, if anybody has any kind of idea about what the series is or who the people who made it was, they're going to tell you that game's going to be difficult.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is that Steve Bitto actually says something on Twitter about this as well. He says, "Are the story and worlds worth experiencing on their own? If yes, then yes, and if no, or if not, then no." And then he says, obviously, easy mode wouldn't be the complete experience, but it would allow more people to consume the part of the game they enjoy. And it correlates that, specifically the bottom part correlates back to the top, where with what Jason was saying, is that it's not the complete experience with the easy mode. So why put it in the game?
Okay, so
like I get it.
I do have to play the devil's advocate here.
You can play the devil's advocate
because this ties into some of the thoughts I've seen on here, and this is also some of the stuff. I'll mention some of the Discord stuff as well, and I think that I'll also start doing that. I think I'm probably going to make a Communities Take Discord channel so that when people want to do it in there and flesh out a little more, they can. But some of the things I saw echoed a lot. One of them was from Blake, so that's Captain Chronic in the Discord. I saw one of the things he said, and then I've also seen mirrored from a lot of other people, and I'll look and see if there's any more on Facebook that specifically say this. But there was one we saw a second ago, actually. So for people, they can still have their experience while others have theirs. So Blake had that same essential sentiment, which is adding an easy mode to the game
doesn't
take away
experience.
What the original was, but. And this is where this is devil advocate on both sides.
Well, your wording there is something that I completely disagree with.
So you're dissect it to make you let me know what I even said and how you took it, so I can make sure I'm representing them correctly.
No, you are representing them correctly, but that's the statement that I disagree with them above all. Is that
and go into why
when you take away this game's niche, you are then completely taking away its identity. It doesn't matter about the difficulty, because the difficulty is the sole purpose of these series. You don't go play Ninja Gaiden and put it on the easiest difficulty, because the game is meant, you might have.
No, I didn't. Okay. But just to pause you for a second and to go ahead. I want to see what you say. I was going to get into something, but I do want to see how pertinent my critique is to what you're going to say before I say it. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
This echoes Jason once again, is that if you take away the difficulty, the games have pretty cool lore. They have really cool boss fights, but it takes away an aspect. And actually, if you, I know a couple of people on our Discord went and read it. I made an article about this. There's something special about when a video game can actually teach you life lessons that can stick with you that's not related directly to the video game. All those people who are saying this game is too hard and I can't play it, you're not doing it right. Because you're not taking what the game is offering, which is a lesson, and you're not learning the lesson. You're just letting the game beat you, and you're getting mad at the game, and then you're ranting about it. This game is not impossible. You're not going to go and hit a home run the first time you play baseball. That doesn't mean that they should bring in the line for the home run to be 10 feet away from the home plate.
Dude, that is a super apt analogy. Continue.
You're not going to... Just because something is hard doesn't mean it should be easier, even if the experience doesn't change for the person who decides to make it hard for them. That's not comparable to me. Because when you play these games, everyone, the first time you play one of these games, is going to struggle to some extent. Whether it's right when they start out, which is what I did, whether it's against certain bosses, which everybody's done. There's been boss fights that me and Brett have literally tried to help each other beat.
The funny thing about that too, on that point, is how it's different for everybody, and it shows the games what your strengths are.
That's
some
the
of the
conversation
bosses
of the game.
Yeah, some of the bosses are based around how patient can you be. Some of the bosses are based around how ballsy can you be. How aggressive can you be while still maintaining your cool and your calm. You know?
What's a better conversation? A conversation that me and you have upon beating a boss in Skyrim, a mini boss, and how we did it? Or is it a conversation celebrating the fact that we beat a boss that we were stuck hard on for a week and we finally did it, and how we did it?
Yeah, I think definitely in our case, and I mean, it's important for us to frame it that way a little bit because everyone has a different experience.
Right.
But I do,
I mean, Blake himself is somebody who advocates the difficulty, and he is a fan of the Dark Souls series.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and just to put his side out there, he also advocates the addition of an easy mode. So
that's what I just said.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought you said he. Oh, I thought you meant he advocated the difficulty of the series.
No, he advocates a difficulty
selection.
Yeah. So like that's the thing, is that you can be mad about it, and you can be mad that the game is gonna change. That there should be a change. But the problem is that when you're arguing about the game because it is too hard. Now this is very important in this conversation, because there's a separate conversation to be had about the difficulty, but not from a difficulty standpoint, but because of an accessibility standpoint, which we'll get to. But that you shouldn't change the game. You could argue that I don't have enough time to learn this game. I'm going to be very blunt with you. Then you shouldn't play the game. That's it. If I don't have time to go sink hundreds of hours into World of Warcraft, I'm not going to complain about making the grind easier. If I don't have 100 hours to go play Destiny, I'm not going to complain about making the grind faster. If you don't have the time to play something, you're not going to drag it down for everybody else who does. And even then, I'm at 40 hours in Sekiro, and I've had it since launch day, which is about roughly 2 weeks now. I'd say, actually, I think it's 2 weeks on the nose from when we're recording, but I'm about 40 hours in. The funny thing about Sekiro is that it's so different that it even takes players who know the Soul series so well, and it actually forces them to learn a new formula.
I've seen some of them have harder times than people who are coming in at the beginning because they're so set in their ways.
The muscle memory is there to just dodge, and then...
Well, and like you said, they took the lesson and learned it so much that they over-applied it, and that they've closed their mind to learning the new one quickly, at least.
That's me. Yeah, it's literally taken me so long to realize that, and I think I said it last episode when we talked about it, is that, instead of dodging there, I should have tried to deflect. But I dodged out of instinct, out of habit.
So just to go into that, and then I also want to kind of stop for a second and break down a couple things you said. Okay. For important purposes. I really do think that they're important for us to cover as to what we're talking about, and just to try and be fair. But yeah, whenever we talked about that last time and you said the same thing, and I was like, I know I'm supposed to be doing that too, but you said it, and I was like, I really got to start doing that. And I started parrying far more often when I was even fighting normal enemies. Instead of going up to them and immediately trying to kill them, I was waiting and letting them attack me so I could parry and get that habit down. And I noticed it helped me a lot, but then immediately when I got to the Chained Ogre, because I don't feel like you're supposed to be able to parry him, and I don't know if you can. Actually, I'm so scared of it that I go back to dodging because it's my habitual happy space.
Yeah, you can do that
as long as it's not his.
Well, that's
death
the
grab
tricky thing. Yeah, the perilous attack. That's the tricky thing about this game, though, is that there are some bosses that like you're pretty much supposed to deplete their posture health the entire time.
Yes,
but there are some bosses
which
that
is the way you do that is by parrying.
Yeah,
right?
there are some bosses that play in a way that you don't do that. You got to chip away their HP. Because there are some bosses that I fought that where I could deflect every one of their attacks perfectly. They'll do something where I have to run away, and then by the time I get back to them, their posture bar is back to 0. So like it's okay. This is a long game, but before you dissect what I said, just to round off this conversation,
I feel like there should be more, but round off this leg if
my
it is
conversation with this specific thing about time.
Okay,
and that's that video games at their core will always and have always been a hobby. They are something that you can go and do for 30 hours. They are something you can go do for 2 or 3. The Soul series and Sekiro are no different. If you don't have the time to play these games, there are other games to play. A Twitter user says, if people are going to cry because the game is too difficult, then go play something else. It's not like there's a shortage of games. And then Ryan also says, devs should make the game what they want. If they don't like the game, then don't buy it. It's that simple. So
we'll get back to that in a minute.
Yeah. But
because I really, really want to talk about that one.
Yeah. But
you go ahead.
My whole thing is that you can play these games. I don't know why people are making it sound like this is an hour sink just to learn the game. It's not. It really isn't. It's going to take a while to get better at the game. That's the whole point. The point of this series as a whole is to get good. People hate that because people hate the way it's presented to them.
Exactly. I will give it that. It's a very crass way of saying it. The way you just said it is a far more sensible,
but there are
slow
people who
and
say,
explained
like, how
out
do
word.
I beat this boss? And the comment is literally just get good.
What they mean, it's also GITE
GUD.
Yeah. So, but it's become such a thing that
it's become
it
the
almost
meme
seems
of
like
the
an
series.
attacking of just saying that. Oh, how do I do this? And some people get mad at it because the answer really is. And this series is different, actually, a little bit. This series is because there are some skills and stuff that are tied into it. The answer could be a little more complex than that.
It could.
Whereas
be, yeah.
in the Soulsborne games, it really just comes down to get good.
For context, that sentence, if you see that, is literally what that means. And it's very rare somebody means it in a toxic way. I don't think I've ever seen it in just a really toxic way.
But it's hard. It's hard to pull.
That's what I was about to say. In itself, it's hard to judge whether or not they're being toxic by the way they're saying it,
because you can't understand tone or how it was meant to be said.
Because it's the same phrase. It never changes. It's
text. You can't put,
even then. It's just
you can't put stick. You can't put stink on it. You can't laugh
it's
with
the
it.
Same thing, and multiple people say it. Some people think that it's like, oh well, that's just something they do. Like what that means, and I actually saw somebody on Reddit break this down before, is that like somebody said, it was in a Bloodborne thread, and they said, I need help being Father Gascoigne or Gascoigne. What do I do? And then they said at the bottom, they said, don't say get good. I've got good. And then the highest rated comment on the thread with over 1,000 upvotes was like, I see what you said at the bottom, and you have it because you haven't beaten the boss. Here's what we mean. And then he listed off that like learn the attack openings, learn when to parry, in that game is shooting. But like, and learn your windows. And then when he transforms as a beast, take in his moveset and learn his moveset. None of that takes a substantial amount of time to learn when you're playing these games. You learn the basics of these games within the first 10 to 30 minutes, pretty much. The deflect mechanic you learn, the death blow mechanic, the sneak mechanic, you learn all this. The rest of the game isn't trying to teach you anything. They're trying to make you better at it. And that's the thing, is that like, you're not going to miraculously be able to play these games and get better at them. These games would not work as an easy game.
Yeah, I agree with that. But let's take this time right now to kind of go back. And I just, when you're using some of these things as your arguments and your linchpins into them, I do think it's important to talk about why they're different and why sometimes a lot of your arguments I agree with. A couple of the ones that I think are a little bit hard to stomach is that okay, so MMOs is a big thing you brought up. If you don't have time to play whatever it be, World of Warcraft, for the hundreds of hours it would take for you to do all the content needed.
By the way, what I said about those two games in particular, I'm basically like saying like you're not going to be able to play those either. I'm not saying don't play the games.
No, and I get that. I get that. But what it comes down to, and I think that someone says this in here, and if they don't, I still think it's an obvious thing that pops up, which is this is a single player game. The two games that you just talked about are multiplayer games, and there are a multitude of other multiplayer games that if we did the same thing, there's an effect on everybody. Because the difference between a multiplayer game is that in a multiplayer game, when you're dealing with something like this, it's something that happens across the board and affects all players. It can't be something that's based off of selection, and even if it can be, like in Destiny's case, where it's a faux selection, where if you go into a mission, at least in that instance, for that mission only, you can play it on hard, and you and your group have agreed that you're going to play on hard. But the majority of Destiny exists in an open area where everything happens exists. So think about when you're rolling around on the EDZ in Destiny, you can't implement an easy mode because it's a persistent online world. If you make the game easier, it doesn't do it for a subset of people. It does it for all people.
Right.
Now the argument, I think it's important to talk about that. The argument here is that in a multiplayer game, I've actually seen a lot of people say it's because it's a single player game that they feel like this should be taken into account, because it's a game that can be had, like they're saying, it can be had in such a way that the original experience is still intact, and because it's something that doesn't involve online at all. The thing about that, some people said that even Bloodborne and Dark Souls and stuff should, and I would even argue on those that they can be played offline, but they're obviously not intended to.
Yeah,
those games are meant to have the asymmetrical online, to where you get like hints and stuff from other people, and they're also meant to have the invaders, which is an active online thing that's meant to be part of the game. It's part of it's part of what makes the game challenging, keeping you on your feet, knowing that a real player can come into your world at any time,
right,
and wreck your shop.
Oh yeah.
So you've got to pay attention. You've got to learn from the game, like you said. That breathing down your neck is supposed to make you pay more attention to the game, because all the bosses in the game do is teach you different mechanics that you need to learn, and different patience. Like, if you need to be patient, if you need to be more aggressive. Definitely Bloodborne. I think Bloodborne did a good job of making you understand, like, this is a boss where the majority of this game is about being aggressive. It's about going after people, which is already different from the Dark Souls series. The Dark Souls is about taking your time, finding your step, and then hitting it.
For the most part, yeah.
Yeah,
there are
across
classes
the board.
in Dark Souls that
my laptop's gone.
That allow you to do other.
I'll be a little bit more. Yeah, definitely Dark Souls 3. It upped it a little bit more.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But so when you look at that though, a lot of it comes down to going back to the main point of time. When you're looking at a game like Dark Souls and even Bloodborne, I think the argument is less salient for them because they're obviously intended to be online. This is a game that From has made from the top to the bottom to say there's no online part of this at all. So the game is not made with online play and intention. If you were to make this game have a difficulty setting, this is actually one example of a game that would not be affected across the board for all players because of that. And there's no way it could affect anybody except for yourself because of the fact that there's no online element. And in that, even in like Dark Souls states where the online is not a completely separate element, it's tied into the game. So this game doesn't have that. Now, let me finish real quick, just so we can get through it all.
Well, I know you're being devil's advocate because the question I'm asking.
Well, it's more than that. I do think that it's important for you to.
I understand.
You say, well, on this game, I don't have 100 hours for the grind, so let's focus on time. I don't have 100 hours for the grind on World of Warcraft, so I'm not going to play it. Well, I don't think anybody's expecting you to make the grind easier on World of Warcraft because it doesn't just affect you; it affects everybody. So in the situation for Sekiro, if we go back towards that, and that this is a single-player game, it comes down to why is there on this? But The Witcher has difficulty settings,
right? But even then, if you just had normal difficulty on, the game's still 60+ hours, which Sekiro is not.
Yeah.
So that's the problem.
Yeah.
Is that people are relating that they just want to beat this 40-hour game and experience it without learning what makes this game have its identity.
Again, and I agree. I agree with that. But just the some of the arguments you bring up, I just don't feel are quite enough on there. I feel like some of your arguments just stand up on their own without needing as much examples, because bringing up The Witcher is also not a game that has demanding combat and hard enemies that are exactly what you're saying, and I'm using this to actually try and strengthen your argument, which is that the difference between The Witcher and this is that Sekiro is a game that's made to live and breathe. So The Witcher 3 is made to live and breathe in the fact that it's a massive world with a lot of stuff you can do. Sekiro's real stick is that, yeah, there's a world here and there's characters and these all exist to kind of give you a reason as to why you're going through these areas and why you're fighting these things. But all From Software games are essentially a ball of lore that you're just learning about and some cool stuff that may happen to your character. But the bulk of the game is not really about what's happening as much as it is about the time and dedication it takes to learn every enemy. And that's not true in other games. So it's a little bit of one of those things where right now From Software are almost in a monopoly of this, where they're one of the only developers that understands how to make a game that the entire point of the game is to be difficult, and the point of the game is from start to finish to take the time necessary. We can equate it like you were talking about to playing baseball, to playing guitar. You know, everybody can go buy a guitar. Everybody can pick a guitar up. Me and you, okay, I have a guitar in there right now. If I went and grabbed it and brought it in here, which one of us two could play guitar better?
I mean, you obviously, because you put the time into it.
Exactly. And so again, strengthening your argument comes down to, for people that say, well, I don't have the time to put the 100 hours into it, it seems like a crass way of saying, well, then the game is just not for you. So some people get mad at that, but it's the truth. And it comes down to, and I wish I had it open. I hope maybe I can find it. Somebody said probably the best thing to it is that not every game is made for everybody. And you just have to get over that. That's what it
is. And that's the thing is the reason I related the time issue to this is because that is the biggest excuse I see on people why it needs a difficulty level.
The secondary one I've seen,
because of time.
The secondary one I've seen, if we want to get into that real quick, is time. You're right. I've seen a lot of people say, I don't have the time to be able to learn these things, but I still want to experience the game. Well, then I hate to say it, but
the game is not for you.
And I want to save this last bit for the final thing.
What you're talking about was on Twitter.
Was it? Okay, I think it was. Was it Josh that said it? I want to say it was Josh Ayers. Somebody said it. But it's the best way to say it is that.
Oh, well, technically, I did
It's saying like this. Okay, books, right? Let's go into the idea of a book.
Okay.
A book is something that you could argue all you want. I get the plot holes or the holes in the argument of a book is not something, which technically it can be updated and repressed and reprinted. But the idea of a work of literature and why it exists in the way it exists is that the work of literature is there. It's exactly as the artist wanted it to be. It's exactly how they intended it to be. Flaws and all. Even if you don't like it, that's fine. The book is made. It is a piece of art. Everyone experiences it the same, but they all get different things out of it, regardless of that. Just because you don't understand what the words are, just because you don't understand these phrases or or it's too cumbersome for you to read because you don't feel like you have the time or you don't have the understanding needed for these things to make sense. Maybe you don't have enough of a grasp on narrative, foreshadowing and narrative plot devices to be able to have the book land with you the same way as it does on everybody else. It doesn't mean that those aspects should be dumbed down because they exist, and there's nothing keeping you from experiencing the game as well outside of your own will and ability to push through. But the other one that Saul was, Saul talking about time is a big one, and I think time is
the main one I've seen.
The secondary one I've seen is just genuinely skill with the added thing on there of it's not mindful enough of disabled gamers.
Now let's get to that part second. After I just want to wrap this up real quick.
Go for it.
I want to wrap up this whole entire part about time and then just the general difficulty.
And then we'll end with the difficulty with disabilities,
is a separate thing.
And then the last thing, which ties back into Ryan's points about the developers themselves. So go ahead.
When you think of something, you immediately know of a title of a series or something within a series itself. You automatically know of the content of the series based on the name of any related element to that series. If I say Tarantino, you're going to think immediately of Quentin Tarantino. You're going to think of the movies that come to mind. You're going to think of his style, bloody, with lots of cursing, rated R, pretty much everything.
Probably going to have Samuel L. Jackson somewhere.
Probably going to have Samuel L. Jackson in it. Might have Leonardo DiCaprio in it. It's all going to be taking place in his universe. You know that. If I say anything, if I say Dead Space, you think of the series. You think that, okay, it's creepy and atmospheric. It's kind of slow, except for the third one. You know that it's going to take place with something to do with, I can't think of the aliens' names.
Necromorphs.
I got you, boo. And if I say Dark Souls, difficulty is almost one of the things that pops in your mind first.
Difficulty?
If I say Bloodborne, difficulty is something. If I say this game is like Dark Souls, but difficulty.
If we're using that
mind.
as a point of reference, the number one thing you're going to think of
Right.
is difficulty, which we've covered, to be fair. But
there
continue.
have been hundreds of games to come out and to take this route to try to gain a similar identity. There has been, and we said some earlier, you know, Salt and Sanctuary, Gambit,
to mix success too.
mix success depending on the one.
Some of them have done very well for themselves.
Yes, and we saw a resurgence in harder difficulty games after Dark Souls got big. That difficulty point is its identity. That's what it is. It would be this. It's the same that like when Halo came out as an RTS and people were like, that's not Halo. The same will happen to anything that has very strong identity traits and you take traits away.
I want to say this, and I think you might even agree. I know that we're using difficulty because it's the word that's thrown out there a lot, but before we finalize this, I think that this is where I stand on this, on that even wording. I don't feel like the word difficulty is actually fair for FromSoft because it's not that the games are difficult. They honestly aren't. The games are not difficult. They demand you to learn how to play them.
Well, that's the problem. And
that's not difficulty. There's two different things.
Yeah.
Difficult is like the idea of a bullet sponge, right? Difficult is something like in Destiny where the way that they make the game harder, and even in certain games that have difficulty settings, the way they make the game harder and make it more difficult in their mind is by just saying, well, what if we just take all the same enemies, give them 200% health, and then we'll make it to where you take double damage. And that's what they kind of do, right? Difficulty is about an external factor that you can do to raise them up. The thing about, and this actually ties into another topic that goes into why I don't think an easy mode is necessarily necessary for this, but why I think a few of the other solutions I've heard are a little more of a reasonable ask. And it still comes down to the final point we will get into in a minute as to whether that has to happen or not. But I don't think that the games are difficult. I think that the games have a way that they understand of being played, and all they do is ask that you pay attention to them, you respect what they're trying to teach you, and that you just learn from them. The thing is, technically, very few things in life are difficult. What they are is that they ask you to respect the time necessary to master them. There are some things that do both. There are some things that are difficult and ask you a lot to master them. There are things that are physically difficult. Learning how to put a roof onto a building is not something that's easy to do, and that's why not everybody does it.
Right.
But it
Laying down
also
concrete.
it also does take the time to learn how to adequately do it. It's not something that everyone can do. You know, you can say that learning how to walk is difficult. I mean, but really it's not. Learning how to walk is just understanding what it is for most people. And of course, there are always extraneous circumstances on these. But for most people, it's just, well, walking just demands that you put the time and effort into learning how to walk correctly. And then you move into running. Well, guess what? Running's the same way. We all can run. Some people can run better than other people. You know why? Because they took the time and effort in to understand how to run better. Like Saul said with baseball, somebody's put the time and effort in to make sure that they understand how to do and hit a home run. They don't just pull in what the home run line is. You don't make it easier in that sense because it pulls it of all sense of reward that comes from it, not because it was difficult, but because you were dedicated and overcame the barrier of entry is what I'll even say it is. And some people can say things don't need a barrier of entry, but I think we'll kind of get into that with this last piece.
Yeah, like that.
Which goes into, and I think this is really interesting. So Saul, do you want me or do you want to spearhead?
I'll let you spear this part.
Okay.
So I'll spearhead the first one.
So the argument I've seen from a lot of people is difficulty specifically and being able to make the enemies easier, but this ties into what I was just saying. You know, one of the things about that game is a lot of enemies die in one hit, 2 hits. Definitely,
especially later,
and I mean normal enemies.
Yeah, like regular enemies.
And that's the majority of the map, if you really think about it. You know, even the way those games work is that everything can kill you, but you can kill it just as quickly as it can kill you. It's all about, are you going to learn from the lessons that you need? So in the case of parrying, are you going to parry and learn? The game tries to tell you that you're supposed to parry. Are you going to parry or not? You know, you see the enemies do it. The enemies block you whenever you go to do it. The game shows you constantly with visual, you know, it shows you visually that, hey, this is what the enemy's doing. Are you going to mimic the enemy so that you can learn how to overcome them or not? But let's pull this into the idea real quick of what people talk about with difficulty of being able to perform the tasks that are required to even perform in the game. And that goes into the idea of people saying that this needs to happen for disabled gamers. Now, there's two sides of the argument I stand on for this. I think that there's a side of people who say that disabled gamers who lack maybe some form of finger control, muscle control, maybe don't have an arm, maybe they're missing a limb, maybe they're missing a digit specifically, maybe they're only missing one or two fingers, maybe they don't have a thumb, whatever it be. And I think, I'm going to tie this argument back into, and I'll go ahead and say where I stand on this one is that that's not a valid argument in the sense of, have you seen, you remember we talked about on this podcast, that great Microsoft commercial they did, and it's a little cheesy, but where they have all the kids running down the street like he's about to do it. He's about to do it. And what do you see? You see this disabled kid playing this game and beating it. And what it is that you can say what you want to. Maybe the argument really comes down on this situation. Sony, if they're playing on PlayStation, needs to do more to make a disabled controller. That's a different argument than the game itself needs to do something, because what happens is the game has done everything it needs to do. People who are disabled, and plenty of friends I have, and I actually do have a friend named Derek who literally has a nub on his right side that he uses to play games. Jordan Leaper, he's got...
Jordan Leaper, I don't want to call him Brentley.
Brent's his cousin.
Yeah, Brent's his cousin, yeah.
But he goes down to just a little nub that is right here, right after his forearm, so he doesn't have a hand to play with.
And do not let him poke your sides.
Yeah.
That hurts.
But look, these are people that play video games and enjoy doing so because they don't see their disability typically as a barrier of entry. All they see is a game, and they're just learning how to go about doing it. And I've seen people do some amazing, amazing things in games that I've had problems doing things in, because what did they have? The dedication, the willpower, and just and they're going to sit there and going to do it. They're going to figure it out. There are people that literally have made crazy controllers because of that fact. And I don't think it's fair to say that. And again, you could argue that for those people with disabilities, whatever it be, who do want the original challenge to be able to overcome, that adding the easy mode still gives them the ability to do it because it's just a mode. A lot of people talk about the social idea around something. And if you want the social idea around something to be that disabled people have to have it be, and I genuinely mean this, if you're telling me that you think that disabled people have to have things at an easier way for them to be able to do it, even if you think the original thing exists, it's going to create the social stigma that disabled people need easier abilities to do things, and it takes away their ability to overcome these things, or at least feel like they're able to. And it sets a stigma. I'm trying to think of the word it sets a standard essentially to where potentially people who are growing up disabled and are figuring this out, if we get into a point where at one point these disabled people are saying, well, from what I'm hearing from society, I'm supposed to expect things to be easier for me because I'm disabled, and I should never think that I should be able to overcome my disability and do something. And that's my personal stance on it, and say what you will. I know I'm not disabled, but I know plenty of people who are, and I know that those people that I've talked to them about this in other things. It wasn't specifically about gaming, even though I've talked to some of them about gaming because they do game. It's about the ability for them to overcome things, and that's what helps them feel like they're not different. They're not, what I mean is that they're still normal. They're just different. Not different in a negative way. They're just different. But they've been able to work with that difference and be able to overcome it, and it doesn't matter. It's the same sense of euphoricness for them as it is for us when we do it. And it's just, why should you take that away from people and set a standard where that's there? But the flip side of that argument real quick, do you want to add anything to that before I go to the flip side? Because this is more of the side of why I don't think it's necessary for people who are disabled.
Well, I was just going to say very, very similar to what you did and almost parrot it. And that's that I know disabled people too. We both do, some of the same people, as a matter of fact. And what really kind of irritates me, and this is personal because this is, like I said, this is all personal experience. I see more people saying, what about disabled people who aren't disabled? Then I see an outcry of people who are disabled who want this changed.
Yeah.
And that's the big problem, is that, like, to me, that's almost a dehumanizing thing to do. Because I browse the Sekiro subreddit, the PS4 subreddit, the Xbox, and all this other stuff. It's very, very uncommon, and if I've ever seen it, that somebody who comes out who is disabled who actually is asking for something. And by that I mean, like, somebody is asking for help with the controller mod, and in which I can't remember who did it, but a company was literally, they put a setting in their game for this person because of his disability and in a patch. And then there was another company who made this guy a controller specifically on how to play, or so he can play.
Yeah. And now that's thankfully that barrier is getting pulled down by people like Microsoft making controllers with that in mind.
Right.
So then the barrier of entry is not being able to use the controller. The barrier, because that's a different argument. It really is. If you say, well, I can't play Sekiro because the controller I have doesn't have the ability for me to use my limited muscles or whatever, that's a different argument. That's not Sekiro's fault. That's the PlayStation. That's really the fault of PlayStation for not having an easy accessibility for you to be able to do that, like Microsoft has at this point. And if you want to leverage that complaint, that's a whole different complaint. And I think we can have a way more productive conversation about what that is than this. But go ahead.
Well, and that to just close off my stance with that, with specifically disabled and accessibility things, is that stuff. That every disability is so wide in range and what it affects and how it affects and what you can and can't do.
That ties into the other side of the argument, is that there's more than one. So we're actually, in this sense, I guess we should specify. We're saying that this is more on the side of people who have physical disabilities that may make them physically unable to do these things. Right. Well, I don't know how. I don't really know what you call them disability wise, but. We won't go into it just yet. But the flip side of them are things like people who are colorblind or something like that, and that's a little bit of a different thing. And they're still the main point.
Still
but
a disability.
Colorblind is still. I mean, you can consider it a disability if you want to. I don't actually know.
I think it is.
I think it's considered a disability.
From a national standpoint, it is like.
So there are things like that. There are people who. I mean. I can't think of a lot of them off the top of my head, but there are definitely disabilities that go in a completely different direction than saying that you're
arthritis and stuff like that, where like your hands lock up.
Well, I would still consider that essentially a that errs on the side of people who are missing.
What are you talking about?
Some kind of what I mean, like colorblind is something that. So no one can tell. No one knows you have that.
Oh, okay.
But it's there, and it does affect the way you play games.
So something that's not visible in a sense.
Essentially.
Well, that's hard for because we're talking about specifically fingers and hands.
Well, yeah. But that's why I say there's two sides of this argument. So the argument that we're on right now is to why I don't think it's for people who have physical disabilities or things you can see or whatever it be. I mean, things that you can notably tell that that's going on for them. They don't have that, but I guess this is a great time to transition to another thing. For certain people, and I really want to bring this up, for certain people, and this was on the Twitter thread, and it was a follower that I'm not used. I don't recognize him off the top of my head, so I definitely want to go look at it real quick. But essentially, what he was talking about is he has different things for him that go into it, and I feel for those, and I understand it. But going more into the idea of things that you can't control, I do like the idea that there's nothing you can do necessarily. I say nothing. And that may show that I have a little bit of a lapse in knowledge on things that you can completely do to get over these things. But what are you going to do? You can get a special controller made or whatever.
I wonder if you can use the Xbox Accessibility Controller on PS4.
Well, okay, what I mean by that is, could PlayStation implement a colorblind mode themselves, or does that have to be done on the game side? And I think it probably has to be done on the game side because it's based off the colors you use.
I think so. Someone correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Okay, so this is Jay Phantom Bane, and I want to read his off because I think it's interesting. I like the idea of adding accessibility options, like adding better visual or vibration cues when an enemy is about to attack so people can grasp when to parry. I personally have a disability that affects my hands when they constantly shake and get worse in intense situations. Let me see. He replied to that somewhere. Where was the 2 out of 2? Hold up.
See... Yeah, go ahead and finish that up so I get full
context.
Yeah,
I want to try and find it. Oh, I read somewhere that Celeste had an option that slowed certain sections down and added an extra jump. Maybelline Impens. So this one goes towards that. I'm sorry. This wasn't the one I was thinking about. Somebody put one up that was talking about things like colorblind aspects, and it may have been on Facebook.
It was Koi Live on our Patreon, wasn't it? Very top one.
Well, Koi Live is on Twitter, so let me find that.
That's what I'm saying. Koi Live on
I think the opposite is incredibly important from an accessibility standpoint. I've done a whole rant on accessibility in video games. Just put a disclaimer on the lower difficulty, like Celeste's assist mode, and how it's not developer intended someone to play it. That's actually a reasonable point, and that goes before the main point of what the developer wants to do. But not adding in lower difficulty accessibility options is just a giant middle finger to those who can play the game, who can't play the game otherwise. Muscular problems, arthritis, tics, or mentally slow can all prevent someone who wants to play from playing the game. And again, I really do genuinely feel on all these. I get that that's why it comes down to.
Yeah, I understand, and I feel bad that those people cannot
I feel
I
more.
feel bad they can't experience the same things we can.
And I'd say I feel bad that they don't feel like that they can. For those people, if there's someone who legitimately looks at this game and says, I don't feel like I can do it because of this, this, and this, I more than anything feel bad that for whatever reason, and I genuinely don't know what their reasons would be, whatever their back end reason is, but if they genuinely feel like they can't overcome those things to play this, and that's incredibly unfortunate. But there's a level of a lot of things can be overcome with enough dedication, and I just think, and this does tie into one specific thing. This is art. Above and people have talked about this a long time, and sometimes you get tired of hearing people saying that video games are art and this and that, but video games are a creation of somebody. This is something that somebody sat down and said, this is what I'm going to make. And the whole team comes in and says, we agree that this is what we want to make. This is a team effort. We're all working towards building this one product as we see it. And when it goes well, like I think it did in Sekiro's case, and like it does in a lot of the Dark Souls games, what you get is a game that is obvious. It exudes these like,
you know exactly what it is before you technically even play it. Like, you know what to prepare yourself for.
Yeah, and From Software have done such a good job of that you know what you're getting into, and you can always see it exudes that character. Yeah, and From Software's equation, it's like, man, these people knew out of the gate they wanted a game that wasn't difficult. They wanted a game that forced you to learn it. They wanted a game that you had to stop what your preconceived notions of what games are supposed to be are, and that we want to make you, force you to think another way so that you can overcome this, and you will feel the greatness of what it feels like to overcome these things. And Saul, this goes back to your article you were talking about. The life lessons you can get from that are great. The lessons you can take away from this and going, sometimes you need to be patient, sometimes you need to be aggressive, sometimes you need to work and put the time and effort in for something to work.
Sometimes you got to look at your mistakes and realize what you're doing wrong
to be able to fix it.
To be able to fix the problem at hand. I posted in Discord before I even before all this even came out about Sekiro, was that I finally beat a boss I was stuck on, and my heart was pounding more so than any other Dark Souls boss ever. Like no video game gave me an adrenaline rush like that did.
Sure.
And I was literally shaking with like excitement. I had no more healing gourds left. You couldn't even see my health barely. And it was a boss that has multiple phases, or 2 phases. And then I finally beat this, the very surprising second phase of it. And I was like, that was cool. I was shaking with excitement.
Yeah.
No other game does that. And to kind of wrap all this all up, including accessibility and everything as well, is that I feel really like I feel for those people who have the disabilities and who can't experience things the same way that I can. And that's such a broad statement because everyone or every person with a disability is so different from the next. And there's no way that I can even imagine what you go through, because anybody listening, it could be so different than the next. And it's such a broad thing to say. So like I really do feel for those, and I wish that there was a way to do this. I don't think that forcing a game dev to change something is the right way to do it, because then that's going to lead down the road. And the biggest thing that we've seen in the past 10 years out of any other hobby I've ever seen, is that when you get people who are trying to change the way a game developer does things, when you get enough people and enough devs to finally do it, the ones that don't, even for very solid reasons, that don't change are looked at as bad guys.
This is a perfect example of that.
Yes.
You know,
it's one of those things that, like, there are so many people. This didn't happen with Dark Souls 3.
Yeah, it didn't.
This didn't happen with Bloodborne.
But the goalpost continues to move.
Yes, and the more and more that people try to lobby for change over something that is currently something that has been going on for the past 10 years now as a series, has stayed the same. Just now, because a change doesn't mean change should happen. And that's why I hate saying that, because like I said, I feel for those people who can't play the game because of this. And I really do.
Yeah, and like I said, I think
it's what you've said time and time before, is that if you start taking a mile or an inch, where does it stop?
And I will say, I know there's a ton of people who hate that argument, but there is something to the argument of, and a lot of people refer to it as the slippery slope argument, but it's real. there's certain areas in everything where there has to be a line where you go, well, this one doesn't quite make sense. Why are we trying to change something like this? And somebody's already, I mean, people are saying there are plenty of games that cater to this. There are plenty of developers and publishers out there that go, we want our game to be playable by as much people as possible. And the way to do the change that you want, honestly, is and in terms of if you want to not force, but if you want to really get businesses to get behind the idea of doing these changes and being behind and going, me as a publisher, Activision could have, as a publisher, said, hey, we want to fund Sekiro, but if we're going to fund it and we're going to publish it, we demand, because it's in our area, we demand that there be difficulty settings and accessibility options. Then bam, what it could do is From Software could go, well, do we want to put that in our game? And if we do, then we'll go ahead and go with Activision. And maybe this is an eye-opening experience that we didn't think of before, but we're okay with it. Maybe it's not a big deal. Versus their ability to go, that's just not the game we want to make. No hate, no harm, no foul. But that's not what we're wanting to do. That's not really who we are as developers. That's fine. We're going to go with someone else to make this game because they fit what we want, and it's a more beneficial partnership because we were both on the same page. And there's nothing wrong with that, and I think that it's fair. I think Ubisoft as a company has done very well about colorblind modes and different things like that, difficulty settings being whatever it is. A lot of companies like PlayStation have come to the point where a lot of their games will either launch or have eventually add a difficulty setting that essentially lets you just play the story.
Right.
And that makes sense on a game that's so story-driven. Like Steve Bitto said, is the world and story worth experiencing on its own, or is the drive for the game the primary thing, the difficulty, some other external factor that can't be changed so easily?
Right, which in every From case is difficulty.
Yeah,
it's the draw, it's the identity, it's the
what I mean by that is that we've already seen Sony has gotten to a point where, for the most part, they're just going to let their games come out and have that accessibility option. It seems like a lot of their developers are into that anyway, so they're just letting it happen. But what you see is the difference is, while you're letting that happen, people can support those decisions. And if From Software feels like there comes to a point, they go, well, you know what? We might, and you could say whatever it is, but if this is the reason for the change and you see it as a positive, it doesn't matter what the catalyst was for it. If From Software goes, from a business decision, it does not make sense for us to not include these accessibility options because we'll be priced out of the market by everybody else who's doing it, then that's on them to make that decision or not. And then it's on us as consumers to support that decision or not. And what it comes down to is it shouldn't be you lobbying for other people to not buy the game, which thankfully I've not seen anybody do that. No one's saying not buy the game.
Yeah, I'm glad I haven't seen that either.
Essentially what people are saying instead is that From Software should fix this. Now, I think there's two things. I think if you wanted to tell me that you think that it's unfortunate that it's not there and that you wish it was in there, but that was the end of that conversation, that's fine. That's a reasonable statement.
I would honestly agree with you.
If your secondary statement was that you hope in their next game that From Software takes this criticism and makes a game that includes these things, also fine, because what that means is that From Software can look and they go, whatever we make next, we want to make it the way that, we want to make it something that's close to what we want, close to what the fans want, and we're going to make it from the ground up with this thought process in mind. And instead, what changes there is it gives the creator, like Ryan said, this goes back to Ryan's tweet. It's my favorite one, and I'm so glad he said it because it's the way I truly feel. It is a work of creation. It is somebody's idea, and actually in this case, it's a team of people's idea, and those ideas are all coalescing and coming together, and they make a great product. And some people are not going to enjoy that product for a number of reasons, be it because they don't like the difficulty. Maybe they don't like the gameplay design.
I've said it time
Maybe they
and
don't
time.
like the enemy design.
I've said it before in the podcast way back when, and I'll bring it up again. When someone creates a story, it is their work of art, and you should never, ever, ever
you shouldn't have
critically try to change their work of art. And the main example I always lead with that is that there are so many people requesting a female Link.
Yeah.
Don't mess with that person's story in that expanse. Why not just play a Zelda? Request a Zelda game instead, where you actually play as Zelda. It's the same concept of the feminine being the heroine or the heroine.
Having a heroine instead of a hero.
Yeah, and it still does that. It does it well.
And it does it within the confines of existing lore,
right? Because you could easily play as any time as Zelda, because she does magic. She could be the
there's a little more than that too. I'd say that
heroine of the game.
There's two ways that can go too. I mean, they could, if whoever creates Zelda on their own says, it'd be really cool.
A Zelda game where you play a Zelda.
No, if somebody says it's, it'd be really cool if we made a Zelda game and this time Link was a girl, but, and this all happens on their own. Again, what I mean by that is that this is an artist creation, and it doesn't matter where he does. If he if whoever's making the game, who's spearheading the game, comes and says, it'd be really out there. And again, this comes down to a team's idea, and there's people that are going to support this decision, and that will determine whether they go this way. But the way to tie that into like a Zelda thing is, what if the person who's going to write this Zelda goes, I got a great idea for a story. We're gonna do the first time ever where something's gonna happen. It's gonna be like a glitch in the long running history of. It's always supposed to be like a Link is, for people who don't know, Link is always kind of supposed to be a reincarnation. So it's supposed to be like the hero is reborn. The hero is reborn. It's always
this time it gets reborn into Zelda.
Yeah, for some reason it gets or whatever. Even if it's a girl, it doesn't matter. But if they're doing that on their own and they kind of come into that, that's fine. The thing is that a lot of people think that they're going to pressure people into these changes.
Yeah, and I'm seeing,
and now thankfully I'm not seeing.
It pushes people away.
I'm not seeing too much of that on Sekiro. I've actually seen pretty reasonable examples of people saying this is what I think it should be, and I really think that From Software should change this. But they're not saying change or die. Essentially,
I've
what I mean?
seen a couple of things and a couple of extremists, especially on Twitter, saying stuff about Sekiro that's like just shut up. Like I don't want to get on. There are times I want to get on Twitter on our profile and just be like, no, this is stupid. But like for me, it goes back to like, stop putting the blame on individual games. Blame Sony for not having a controller, because at reality, you could play the game at hand, just not with a controller provided to you by Sony.
Well, in some cases, and in other cases, in other cases, like they said, like
color blindness and stuff. Now that color blindness and dialogue, or subtitle dialogue, should be always a standard thing for those who are deaf and those who can't see certain colors.
And in those situations, I agree that if somebody can't, there's levels. What we mean by that is that we're not just hard no on saying that there can't be any improvements to Sekiro, but it's that we don't agree that anybody should be able to force them to do it.
I don't agree on difficulty being a changeable thing.
Well, what I mean by that
vision
is I agree that somebody has the right to say that that's their opinion, and that they can say that they would wish that moving forward From Software will think that, or even if they go, I wish that From Software will look at this and then think forward to go, you know what, let's go ahead and add that difficulty mode.
That's a given. Yeah, like everybody is entitled to their opinions, and I'll even agree that those opinions,
it's when you're asking for a forced change.
Mine. Yes, while they're not my opinions, I can still respect you as a person because of the way you presented your opinion. But if you're one that says, oh well, From Software should go die in a hole because they hate disabled people for not putting this in their game, you're the bad apple.
Yeah, you're taking something to an illogical extreme,
right? And that's become the big thing lately with just.
And Blake said this on the Discord. I do think it's important to say it. The vast majority has not been that, thankfully.
No, like 99.9% have been the solid ones that I can agree upon, that I can have a conversation
that you can
with.
Understand where they're coming from. And even if we disagree, we can just respect each other's opinions and go, okay.
99.9% of people. There's that 0.1% that I've seen that are just human trash.
Yeah. And even on both sides, for the people that just want to, throw out literally just get good over and over again, and not just once and saying like get good and doing like you're talking about where that breaks down into like, well, give the time its thing. But there are people who just literally jump to every single thing and just reply, get good, get good, get good. That's being toxic, but that's toxic behavior. It doesn't make get good itself toxic. You know what I mean?
I'm going to warn you, if you're ever going to look for help on any Dark Souls game, or any game of its series, you're going to see that comment 100%.
You are.
And that's just, and then.
But it doesn't have to be toxic. That's all I'm.
At the end, what's going to happen is that you're going to play the game and you're going to get good at it and you're going to feel accomplished when you beat a boss you can't beat. And then next time you see somebody ask how to beat that boss,
you're going to become a get gooder.
You're going to chuckle to yourself and be like, get good. But thank you all for tuning in to episode 106 of Triangle Squared. Once again, you can catch us every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, noon Central time. And as always, let us know in the comments, Discord, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere what you thought of the show. And we will see you guys back for episode 107.
Absolutely.
And reader mail as well.
Yeah, and let us know what you think about all this in general. We can kind of do a post-mortem in next week's section if we get a lot more that we hear back of more arguments and the thing. But I'll leave with this. Do you feel like the opinion, and in my opinion it is, do you feel like the major thing that matters the most is whether or not the developer themselves wants to do it, determines whether or not it should be done because it's their work? If you agree with that, let me know. If you disagree, let me know why. I genuinely want to hear why. I'm not saying that I have to be right. I'm curious. I mean, anywhere,
and we don't mean a suggestion.
Anywhere where you think we're wrong, I'm open to hear why you think we're wrong. You know, I mean, we're just people that take in information, and if you really think we're wrong, let us know why. I mean, genuinely, we're not coming into this trying to offend anybody or say anything. Maybe we have some odd ideas that we don't realize aren't supported by something, or that we're missing some information. If so, feel free to put that information out there. But yeah, let us know what you think, and then we'll just we'll see you guys next time for episode 107. So thanks. It's been Triangle Squared.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks to our patrons, Chad V, Dan Barber, Josh Jarrell, Matthew Green, my name is Dan, Douglas Below, Sean Santarud, Eric McAllister, Shadowist, Steven Salazar, The Stonard, Travis Below, Blake Popes, Eduardo Palomino, Stefan Swanlin, and Koi Live. If you would like to support us, you can do so by going to the link in the description. Thank you.